Elon Musk stood at the podium, his heart pounding in his chest. The lights in the auditorium shone down on him, blinding, yet somehow, the crowd's gaze felt even more piercing. He adjusted the microphone, trying to steady his breath, but it was no use. The crowd's whispers echoed in his ears, and he could feel their skepticism. This is it, he thought, the moment that would either make or break everything. Elon Musk, the introduction had said, entrepreneur, innovator, and the man who thinks he can change the world. But can he? The question hung in the air like a cloud, an invisible weight pressing down on his shoulders. He wasn't sure if he had come here to prove the world wrong, or if he was simply trying to prove something to himself. He glanced at the massive screen behind him. The future of energy, it read. A vision that could save the planet, or destroy him entirely. A vision that had cost him everything. His reputation, countless sleepless nights, and millions of dollars that could have gone to something far more practical. But no one knew that part. No one knew the sleepless nights in dark rooms, the fights with investors, or the countless failed prototypes. They only saw the headline, the flashy technology, and the impossible goals he set for himself. "Good evening, everyone," Elon finally said, his voice low but steady. "I stand before you today, not just to talk about technology. I stand here to talk about the future. A future we can create if we dare to imagine beyond what we think is possible." He paused, trying to gather his thoughts. There was a chance, just a small chance, that this would work. But in the back of his mind, he knew that failure was a very real possibility. If this presentation didn't go well, it could mark the end of everything. Investors would pull back. The media would pounce. And worst of all, the people who once believed in him, the people who had followed his every word, would be the first to turn their backs. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The words were meant to engage the audience, but even as he spoke them, he wasn't sure if he was speaking to them or trying to remind himself. What pushes me forward? He wasn't sure anymore. The room grew still. He could feel the tension thick in the air, almost tangible. Eyes were fixed on him, but not with the admiration he was used to. This was different. This was the look of doubt, the kind that had followed him his entire life. He cleared his throat and clicked a button on his remote, bringing up a slide of sleek, futuristic vehicles on the screen. The audience shifted in their seats, some nodding, others skeptical. "Electric cars are not just the future of transportation," he continued. "They are the future of energy. And to make them work, we need to think bigger, much bigger." A wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. They didn't believe him. Of course they didn't. Who would? He was trying to sell the idea that the future of energy could be sustainable, clean, and available for everyone. But that wasn't what mattered right now. What mattered was that he needed this to work. He needed them to believe him. He looked down at his notes, his hands slightly trembling. Elon Musk was many things: visionary, inventor, entrepreneur. But he was also a man on the edge of breaking down. It wasn't just about the cars or the rockets. It was about proving that all of this was more than just a dream. It was a way of life. "Today, I want to show you something new," he said, tapping the remote again. "This is Tesla's new energy solution. It's not just a car. It's not just a battery. It's a revolution." He waited, the tension in the room palpable, waiting for someone to question him, to doubt him. And they did. A man in the back stood up, holding a hand high. "Elon, with all due respect," he said, "we've heard this all before. What makes you think this time will be any different?" Elon's stomach tightened. He knew this was coming. It was always the same. People loved to see the impossible, but when it came time to make it real, they turned on him. With a deep breath, he leaned into the microphone and answered, "Because this time, I have something you can't ignore." He clicked the remote once more. The screen displayed a detailed map of the world with Tesla's energy infrastructure glowing across it like veins of light. "This," he said, gesturing toward the map, "is how we're going to power the planet. Not just cars, but everything. The world needs energy, and we can't keep relying on old systems that are killing us." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but this time, it was different. The skepticism was still there, But there was something else, too. Curiosity. Elon's words had struck a chord. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was maybe on the right path. Maybe it's not perfect yet. Maybe I'm not perfect yet, Elon admitted, his voice quieter, more reflective. But I believe in this. And I believe in all of you. The future is ours to create, but only if we are bold enough to act on it. As the last word left his lips, Elon glanced out at the sea of faces, feeling a strange mixture of fear and hope. The road ahead was long and fraught with challenges, but at that moment, something changed in the room. The first step had been taken, and it was his. Elon Musk wasn't born into greatness. He didn't have a silver spoon in his mouth, nor did he inherit an empire. What he did have was a dream, one so big it made most people laugh. He had been a boy who believed that anything was possible if you were willing to work for it, even when life seemed to be working against you. Growing up in Pretoria, South Africa, Elon was always a little different. He wasn't the sporty kid or the popular one. Instead, he spent his time buried in books, lost in the worlds of science fiction and technology. His imagination soared higher than the tallest buildings, farther than any airplane could fly. He wasn't interested in soccer games or hanging out with friends. He was too busy dreaming about the future. He remembered the first time he saw the moon through a telescope. His father, a tough and pragmatic man, had gotten him one for his birthday when he was just 10. The world's not going to hand you anything, his father had told him. You want to get somewhere, you have to work for it. Elon took that to heart, even if it was hard to understand back then. His father's cold demeanor, combined with a rough childhood, made him feel like an outsider in his own home. But instead of succumbing to it, he channeled the anger and confusion into something else, an obsession with the impossible. The turning point came when Elon was 17. He moved to Canada to attend Queen's University, escaping the suffocating expectations of his father. The decision was a bold one, almost reckless. But that was Elon Musk. Always taking risks, always willing to bet on his own potential. His mother, May, supported his dreams, though she often wished he would be more cautious. In Canada, Elon began to find his footing. He enrolled in physics at the University of Pennsylvania after transferring from Queen's University, where he eventually earned dual degrees, one in physics and the other in economics. But it wasn't the degree that mattered to Elon. What mattered was the vision, the idea that technology could change the world. His first venture, Zip2, was a modest success. But Elon wasn't satisfied. He knew he was capable of more. And that's when he hit his first true failure. X.com. It was supposed to be a revolutionary online payment company, one that would change the way people sent money. Instead, it became a lesson in failure. The company's board, including some influential figures in Silicon Valley, turned against him. They didn't understand his vision. They didn't see the potential in the radical way he wanted to change the world. And so, in 2000, after a series of intense disagreements, Elon was ousted from his own company. He had lost. For the first time in his life, Elon felt crushed. He had poured his heart and soul into X.com, only for it to be taken away from him. It was a brutal lesson in the ruthlessness of business and the cold indifference of the people who didn't share his vision. But even then, he didn't give up. He sold what was left of X.com, which would later become PayPal, and he walked away with millions. But those millions weren't what he cared about. What mattered was what came next. Elon poured that money into SpaceX, Tesla, and SolarCity, launching the 3 companies that would define his legacy. The road was not easy. In fact, the road was a nightmare. Tesla was on the verge of bankruptcy more than once, with Elon using his own personal fortune to keep the company alive. SpaceX? It was on the brink of failure after 3 botched rocket launches. His investors were getting restless. His friends were getting concerned. But Elon was unshaken. He remembered one of the darkest moments, the 4th SpaceX launch, which was make or break. The previous 3 attempts had ended in fiery failures, and the company had almost run out of money. If this launch failed, it was over. SpaceX would be finished, and Elon would be just another Silicon Valley failure, the latest in a long line of broken dreams. On the day of the 4th launch, Elon had flown to the launch site in Cape Canaveral. Standing on the cold tarmac, Surrounded by engineers and technicians who looked more like zombies than professionals, he had felt an overwhelming sense of dread. His mind raced. What if it doesn't work? What if this is the end? But as he stood there, watching the rocket begin its countdown, something deep inside him stirred. He couldn't stop now. The countdown hit 0. The engines roared to life, and for the first time, everything went perfectly. The rocket soared into the sky, successfully reaching orbit. Elon Musk had just done what everyone said was impossible. He had made history. But the victory didn't last long. It couldn't. The weight of failure always hung heavy over him. Tesla, despite all its promise, was still struggling, and there were days when he wondered if it was all worth it. His personal life wasn't any easier. His relationship with Justine Wilson, his first wife, had crumbled under the pressures of his obsession with work. She had supported him, but there came a point where she couldn't do it anymore. And then there was Amber Heard. Their brief relationship had been an emotional roller coaster, filled with passion, but ultimately destructive. Elon had always been more focused on his dreams than anything else, and it cost him. It cost him time with his children, time with the people who truly cared about him. But his worst failure, the one that still haunted him every night, was his relationship with his father. He had been trying to prove something to his father his entire life, that he wasn't just the quiet, awkward kid who loved books and rockets. He was a force to be reckoned with. But his father's cold indifference never changed. No matter how many rockets Elon launched or how much success he achieved, it was never enough to earn his father's approval. "You're wasting your time," his father would say. "You'll never succeed. No one has ever succeeded the way you think you will." The pain of those words never left him, but instead of letting them break him, Elon used them as fuel. He wasn't just proving his father wrong. He was proving everyone wrong. Elon had walked away from the failure of X.com, from personal losses, and from the doubts that plagued him. He knew that the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. But if there was one thing Elon Musk had learned, it was that greatness never came easy. And he wasn't going to stop, no matter what. Elon stood at the edge of a cliff, his hands gripping the railing of the balcony overlooking the Tesla factory in Fremont, California. The sunset bathed the factory in a golden glow, but the image that burned in his mind was anything but serene. It was a chaos of wires, bolts, and code, a tangled web of his ambition that was threatening to unravel at the seams. The Model 3, the car that would define Tesla's future, had encountered delays. Mass production was lagging behind schedule. The line workers were under pressure. Investors were getting restless, and worse of all, the media had begun to question whether the entire venture was a pipe dream. For the first time in years, Elon felt the weight of failure hanging heavier than ever. He could feel the skepticism creeping back, the same skepticism that had followed him since the early days of Zip2 and X.com. "Elon, we need to talk," came the voice of J.B. Straubel, his co-founder and the chief technology officer of Tesla. Elon turned to see him walking briskly toward him, his face serious. "What's the situation?" Elon asked, trying to keep his voice steady, but even he knew it lacked the usual confidence. "Production's down by 40%. The battery issues are still unresolved, and the investors are circling like vultures. If we don't turn this around in the next quarter, it could be over," JB said, his words cutting through the silence like a knife. Elon nodded, but inside, a familiar panic was creeping in. Could he really do it? Could he pull Tesla from the brink once again? His mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. The clock was ticking. Every second felt like an eternity. His hands clenched into fists. Not again. He wasn't going to let this be the end. He had sacrificed too much to give up now. "We need to get the Model 3 into full production, and fast," Elon said, his voice finally firm. "We'll work around the clock, do whatever it takes. I don't care about the critics. I care about the people who believe in this. We believe in this." JB's face softened for a moment, but the weight of the situation was undeniable. "We've been working around the clock for months, Elon. We're all burned out. Some people are starting to lose faith." Elon took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. His mind flashed back to earlier days, to the countless hours spent in the garage, to the days when even the idea of electric cars seemed ludicrous. "This is the moment," he thought. This is where we find out who we really are. He turned toward the factory floor, watching the workers move like clockwork, each one absorbed in their task. Every part of the operation felt like a reflection of his mind, rushing, uncertain, but ultimately driven by a single belief: the future. "We're going to fix it," he said, his voice unwavering now. "We're going to make this work. I won't let anyone down." Back in his office, Elon sat at his desk, reviewing the reports. The numbers were grim, and the pressure to meet deadlines was suffocating. How long could he keep going like this? The sleepless nights, the constant barrage of emails, and the relentless phone calls. It was a cycle he couldn't seem to escape. Every decision felt like a gamble, and every misstep could bring everything crashing down. Just as he was about to dive into the numbers, the phone rang. "Elon," the voice on the other end said. It was Larry Page, co-founder of Google and one of Elon's longtime friends. "I just saw the Tesla report. What's going on, man?" Elon sighed. "It's bad. Real bad. We're behind on production, and the car's still not up to the quality we promised. If we don't fix this, it could be over." Larry paused before speaking again. "Do you ever think about pulling out? Maybe it's time to cut your losses." Elon's chest tightened. Cut your losses. It was a phrase that had haunted him for years. "No, Larry. We're too close," Elon replied, his voice cold but resolute. "Tesla is my dream. I can't walk away from it now. We're going to make it work." The line went quiet for a moment before Larry spoke again. "All right, but just know, everyone's watching you, and not everyone's on your side." Elon leaned back in his chair, the words stinging more than he cared to admit. He had always thrived in the face of doubt, but this time felt different. The stakes were higher than ever. The world was watching, waiting for him to fail. He could feel the pressure from every direction, squeezing him tighter, almost suffocating him. He had pushed himself to the limit before, but this was something else entirely. Failure now meant more than just financial loss. It meant giving up on the future. If he couldn't make this work, then all of his ideas, the Hyperloop, Mars, sustainable energy, everything would be for nothing. That night, as he walked through the quiet factory halls, Elon found himself thinking about the past. About the times when he had no money, no resources, and no support. He thought about the first days of SpaceX, when he had barely scraped together enough cash to build a rocket. How many times had he nearly lost it all then? But every failure only fueled him more. The workers were still there, still pushing forward, despite the overwhelming odds. He realized, for the first time in a while, that the real strength of Tesla wasn't in the cars, the tech, or the investors. It was in the people. He wasn't just building a company. He was building a movement that could change the world. The belief was there, even if the road was uncertain. As Elon stood by the assembly line, watching the machines hum and the workers moving with precision, he felt a spark of hope. It wasn't over yet. Maybe it never would be. The next morning, Elon called an emergency meeting with his leadership team. He stood in front of them, his eyes hard with determination. "We're going to rework the Model 3's production line," he said. "We're going to do it faster. We're going to do it smarter. And we're going to do it together. This is the moment. No more delays. No more excuses. We either succeed or we fail, but we do not give up." The team nodded, their faces filled with resolve. They had all heard the rumors, the whispers that Tesla was doomed, that it was only a matter of time before they folded. But Elon wasn't going to let that happen. Not now, not ever. In the days that followed, the pressure mounted. Elon was everywhere. On the factory floor, in meetings with engineers, and in late-night discussions with suppliers. It was exhausting, draining, but there was no other choice. This had to work. Then, one night, something extraordinary happened. After weeks of frustration, they finally made a breakthrough with the production line. A new process, a new way of assembling the Model 3, slashed production time in half. The first batch of vehicles came off the line looking flawless. For the first time in months, Elon allowed himself to feel something other than stress. He felt a rush of excitement. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull it off. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when Elon Musk found himself in the heart of a storm. The news came in waves, like a series of crashing waves against a jagged cliff. each one more crushing than the last. His phone buzzed incessantly. Calls, emails, notifications. It all felt like too much to process in a single moment. The first news headline he saw that morning made his stomach churn. Tesla on the brink. Elon Musk's empire facing collapse. Elon had been here before. He had faced failure. He had been counted out. But this time felt different. This wasn't just about one company, one product, or one dream. This was about everything. The stakes had never been higher. His reputation was at risk. His vision for the future was hanging by a thread, and the world was watching to see if this time he would be the one to break. He took a deep breath and forced himself to focus. This wasn't just about the headlines. This wasn't about the doubters or the critics. It was about the mission. He slammed his phone down on his desk. Focus, Musk. His internal voice was harsh, but it was exactly what he needed to hear. He had no time to waste on second-guessing himself. The whole world was waiting for him to fail. But the thing was, he wasn't going to fail. Not now. Not ever. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected place. The new production process, the one that had finally begun to show promise a few weeks back, was still in its infancy. It had been fragile, like a delicate web waiting to collapse under the wrong conditions. But now, something magical was starting to happen. The numbers were improving. The Model 3 units that had once been plagued by defects were now rolling off the production line with precision. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was progress. And in Elon's world, progress was everything. It was enough to fuel the fire. But as he prepared for the next steps, the pressure mounted. Tesla wasn't the only company he was juggling. SpaceX had its own set of issues. The Falcon Heavy mission was looming, and the clock was ticking. SpaceX, too, was on the edge. Despite the success of the fourth launch, there was still the question of whether the rocket could sustain its reliability. If one thing went wrong, just one thing, it could all come crashing down. And then there was SolarCity, the company that had always been his attempt to solve the world's energy crisis. It was supposed to be a game-changer. But now, SolarCity was buried in debt. Elon had been forced to borrow more money just to keep it afloat. If the world didn't see the results he had promised, it would be the end of his efforts to revolutionize clean energy. How much could one man take? The next 48 hours would prove to be the hardest of Elon's life. He called in every favor, every investor, every engineer, every ally. It was all hands on deck. The world, for better or worse, demanded something from him that he wasn't sure he had left to give. The Tesla factory, once a bustling hub of innovation, was now more like a war zone. Exhausted workers were collapsing into chairs during breaks, their faces pale from stress. The pressure on the leadership team was palpable. Elon worked non-stop, moving between Tesla's assembly lines, SpaceX's headquarters, and SolarCity's operations in what felt like an endless cycle of meetings, calls, and crises. One evening, after hours of intense strategy sessions, Elon found himself staring at a wall of numbers. The graphs were bleak. Every key performance indicator, production rates, safety standards, delivery timelines, was pointing downward. He felt the weight of his failures press down on him once more. What if I'm not cut out for this? What if everything I've fought for falls apart? The thought gnawed at him like a poison. But then, as if on cue, an email pinged into his inbox. It was from Jim, one of his most trusted engineers at Tesla. The subject line simply read, Model 3, Solution in Progress. Jim's email was short, but it gave Elon the hope he so desperately needed. The production line had improved by another 25%, and they had found a way to streamline the assembly process further. They were this close to hitting full capacity. This was it, the breakthrough that could turn everything around. But as Elon went to reply, his phone rang. The voice on the other end was familiar. Larry Page again. Hey, Elon. I've been following the progress. But you need to be careful, Larry warned. You're pushing yourself too hard. You've already made history, man. Maybe it's time to step back. You don't need to fight for this anymore. Elon let out a sharp breath. It wasn't the first time Larry had suggested that he slow down. It was, after all, what everyone had been telling him. You've done enough, Elon. It's time to enjoy the fruits of your labor. But Elon knew something Larry didn't. He couldn't stop. He couldn't stop because if he did, The future he had dreamed about would never come to fruition. He couldn't stop because there was still so much to do. "I'm not stopping, Larry," Elon said, his voice quiet but firm. "This is bigger than me. It's bigger than Tesla, SpaceX, or Solar City. This is about the future of humanity. I'm not giving up on that." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, Larry responded softly, "I hope you know what you're doing, man." Elon hung up, a cold fire burning in his chest. No one else could see the vision. No one else could carry the weight. It was his burden to bear. The next week, the entire world held its breath. Tesla hit its production targets, not just on the Model 3, but on every single car in the lineup. The company was no longer on the verge of collapse. For the first time in months, Elon could sense the shift, the turning of a tide. And then came SpaceX's Falcon Heavy launch. The countdown began, the eyes of millions on him. The rocket ignited. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. The roar of the engines, the blast of fire. It was all a blur. But then, the unthinkable happened. The Falcon Heavy reached orbit. The crowd at Cape Canaveral erupted in cheers. And back at SpaceX headquarters, Elon allowed himself a brief moment of relief, though it was fleeting. The work was far from over. But the dream, his dream, was alive. The days that followed Falcon Heavy's successful launch felt like a blur to Elon. The rocket's triumph was enough to spark hope in his team, in the investors, and in the world. Yet, despite the applause, there was no real celebration. He couldn't afford it. There was too much work to be done, too many challenges ahead. In the days after the successful launch, Tesla's stock spiked. Investors were cautiously optimistic again. But Elon knew that optimism could vanish in an instant. One misstep, and it could all come crumbling down. He had barely slept in days, yet his mind kept racing. As he walked through the quiet halls of SpaceX's headquarters that night, his eyes were bloodshot, his thoughts fragmented. He'd barely had time to digest the victory when he'd been thrust back into the maelstrom of Tesla's problems, Solar City's massive debt, and the mounting pressure from the press. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. Something he had yet to fully understand. It wasn't just about meeting production quotas or sending rockets to space anymore. It was about changing the world. But there was a problem. A dark, nagging thought that had been growing in the back of his mind ever since the Tesla struggles had started. His gut was telling him that something wasn't right. His intuition was rarely wrong. One evening, as he sat alone in his office, staring at the glowing screen of his laptop, a familiar email came through. This one wasn't from an engineer or investor. It wasn't from his trusted circle. It was from his lawyer. Elon's heart skipped a beat as he opened the email. The subject line was simple: urgent, disclosure of key information. The content was brief, and as he read through it, his face went pale. The email outlined a startling discovery: a leak. A leak in the company, an insider who had been feeding sensitive financial information to journalists, investors, and rivals. Someone within Tesla, someone close to the top levels of the company, had been sabotaging its progress from the inside. Elon's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just an isolated case of bad luck or poor execution. This was betrayal, and it was deep. He was no stranger to controversy. In fact, he had thrived in the midst of chaos. But this was different. The weight of it hit him like a freight train. Who could it be? As he thought about the people closest to him, a sickening realization started to settle in. It could be anyone. The next morning, Elon gathered his leadership team together for an emergency meeting. The room was heavy with silence, everyone's nerves palpable. They could sense the tension, the urgency in the air. Elon stood at the front, his usual cool composure replaced by a look of grim determination. "I've just received some disturbing news," he began, his voice firm but laced with tension. "There's been a leak. Someone in our ranks has been feeding information to outsiders. Financial data, production secrets, information that has damaged us. We can't afford to ignore this." The room remained silent. He could feel the weight of the gaze from each of his top executives. Who among them could it be? "We need to find out who's responsible," Elon continued. "And we need to do it now. We can't keep running like this. We're at a critical point, and if this is happening within our own walls, we need to address it immediately." The tension was almost unbearable. Finally, Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president and COO, spoke up. Elon, we'll investigate. But how sure are you about this leak? I mean, could it just be market speculation? Elon shook his head. No, this is intentional sabotage. The leak was too specific. It's coming from inside. The room fell into a stunned silence. The realization had sunk in. Whoever was behind this wasn't just working against Tesla. They were working against Elon. The implications were vast. They weren't just losing financial ground. They were losing trust. Later that day, Elon called an emergency meeting with his top engineers, his closest allies in the fight to save Tesla and SpaceX. Among them was J.B. Straubel, his old friend and co-founder, and Franz von Holthausen, Tesla's chief designer, both of whom had stuck with him through thick and thin. We need to look at the numbers again. Every metric, every report. If there's an insider, they might be altering more than just what we see on the surface, Elon said, his voice tinged with frustration. We're being played. Franz, normally the calm and collected presence, spoke up, his face serious. Elon, we need to act fast. If someone is leaking our most sensitive information, we need to identify them before this causes real damage. This isn't just a small problem. This could take us down completely. Elon felt a pang of anger in his chest. Could someone he trusted be the one to destroy everything he had worked for? That night, after hours of combing through financial records and communication logs, something finally clicked. A small, seemingly insignificant discrepancy in the data. An email that had been sent from a secure internal account to a third party. A pattern started to emerge, and with it, a terrifying realization. The leak was not just one person. It was a network. A wave of dread washed over him. The realization stung even more. It wasn't just sabotage from within Tesla. It was a coordinated effort to undermine everything he had built. Elon's mind reeled as he processed the magnitude of the situation. Who could he trust now? But then, just as the crushing weight of betrayal threatened to break him, something incredible happened. The phone rang. It was Jim, the same engineer who had sent the hopeful email about the production breakthrough. But this time, his voice was shaky. Elon, I need to tell you something. I've been trying to reach you for hours. You have to listen. I'm afraid. I'm afraid this goes deeper than we thought. I've seen some things. Some conversations I wasn't supposed to. Elon's heart raced. What was he hearing? I don't know who's behind it, Jim said, his voice now a frantic whisper. But I think we've got someone close to you, maybe even in your inner circle, manipulating the entire system. And I don't know how much longer we can keep it quiet. The truth was out now, and it was worse than Elon could have imagined. The people closest to him, the ones he had trusted to help change the world, were the very people who had been plotting against him. The weight of betrayal sat like an iron block on Elon Musk's chest. He stared out the window of his office. The vast expanse of the Bay Area spread out before him like a sprawling canvas of possibilities. But everything that once seemed so bright, so full of hope, now felt dark. His dreams were under threat, and the people he had trusted with his future had turned against him. Yet, as the sun began to set, Elon felt something shift deep inside him, a spark of defiance. He wasn't going to let this destroy him. He had faced challenges before, but this was personal. He had spent his life fighting to make the impossible possible, to change the course of humanity's future. And now, he was going to do it again, starting with reclaiming his empire. The first step was confronting the betrayal head-on. Elon had always been a man of action, not words, but he knew this moment required clarity. He called for a series of emergency meetings with the leadership teams of Tesla, SpaceX, and SolarCity. This would not be a time for empty pleasantries. This would be the moment where everyone involved in his world would need to decide. Were they in, or were they out? The first meeting was with his core Tesla team. Elon walked into the conference room, his steps deliberate. Every face around the table was tense. They all knew the stakes. They knew the company was teetering on the edge of collapse. I don't need to tell you all that we've been through hell these past few months, Elon started, his voice steady, though his eyes burned with intensity. What I do need to tell you is this. We've just uncovered a serious issue within our company. There's been a leak. Someone has been feeding information to the press, investors, and worse, our competitors. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle in. Everyone in the room was silent. His team was made up of some of the brightest engineers, designers, and managers in the world. But Elon knew this moment was about more than just numbers and production lines. It was about loyalty and trust. I don't know who it is yet, but I will find out. And when I do, we'll deal with it. We're not going to let one bad apple destroy everything we've worked for. Not now. Not ever. There was a long pause before Gwynne Shotwell spoke up, her voice calm but firm. We'll root it out, Elon. We won't let this go unpunished. Tesla will rise from this. We will make it. Elon gave a small nod of appreciation. Gwynne had been with him through some of the hardest moments. If anyone could help pull Tesla back from the brink, it was her. Then, as if on cue, J.B. Straubel, the co-founder of Tesla, stood up. I've got a plan to boost production numbers again. It'll take a few weeks, but we can start rebuilding. One step at a time. Elon looked around the table at his loyal team, seeing the resolve in their eyes. This was it. The beginning of the next phase. Good. Let's do it. All hands on deck, people. We fight together, or we don't fight at all. Let's make this right. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, audits, and strategy sessions. Elon had his people combing through every corner of his empire, analyzing every data point, checking every communication, and ensuring there was no stone left unturned. With the help of his closest allies, he began the painstaking process of identifying the leaker, someone who had been hiding in plain sight. The culprit wasn't just one person, but several. Elon's worst fear had come true. The sabotage ran deeper than he had ever imagined. The individuals involved were high-ranking executives, trusted for years, who had secretly aligned themselves with outside competitors in exchange for financial gain. When the evidence came to light, it felt like the earth beneath his feet had cracked open. His own right-hand people, those he had trusted with his vision for the future, had betrayed him for greed. But Elon wasn't one to wallow in despair. He was determined. The next step was swift action. The guilty were removed from their positions, their access revoked. The entire company was placed under intense scrutiny to ensure that this would never happen again. Trust had been broken, but trust could be rebuilt, and this process would start now. After weeks of upheaval, Elon finally got the chance to step back and assess the situation as a whole. The leaks had been contained, the damaged relationships repaired, and despite the chaos, Tesla's production numbers were on the rise once again. It was working, but there was still one thing Elon had to face: the relentless toll it had taken on him personally. His body felt worn down, his mind exhausted from the constant pressure. For years, he had been driving himself to the edge of human endurance. But now, for the first time, he allowed himself to pause and reflect. As he sat on the balcony of his office, staring out at the city below, he thought about all that he had sacrificed: his time, his health, and his relationships. Was it worth it? The answer, as always, was a resounding yes. Because it wasn't just about the companies. It wasn't about the money, the fame, or the success. It was about the future. The world had no idea how close it had come to losing something extraordinary. If Tesla, SpaceX, or SolarCity had failed, humanity would have taken a giant step backward in its quest for sustainability and space exploration. Elon had bet everything on that future, and he had been willing to lose everything to make it happen. As he thought about the betrayal, he realized something profound. This fight had changed him. Before all of this, he had been so focused on the future that he had sometimes ignored the present. He had alienated people, pushed too hard. But now, more than ever, he understood the importance of balance. The importance of not only having a vision but of sharing it with others, of trusting the people around him to help carry that weight. The phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Franz von Holthausen, the chief designer at Tesla. Elon, Franz said, I've got something to show you. I think it's time we reveal something we've been working on. The next phase of Tesla. Something that will change everything. Are you ready? Elon's heart quickened. This was it. This was the future he had been fighting for. And now, finally, it was in his grasp. I'm ready, he said, his voice calm but filled with an unshakable conviction. Over the following weeks, Tesla launched its new product line, SpaceX made tremendous progress on its Mars colonization mission, and SolarCity's clean energy solutions began to make waves around the world. Elon's companies were back on track, stronger than ever, but more importantly, he was back. And as the world began to witness the true power of his vision, Elon Musk had finally learned the most important lesson of all. The road to success is not just about innovation or intelligence, it's about resilience. It wasn't just about building rockets and electric cars. It was about never giving up, no matter the odds, and staying true to the mission, no matter the cost. And now, more than ever, he was ready for whatever came next. As the days passed, Elon Musk found himself thinking less about the betrayals and more about the possibilities that lay ahead. The betrayals, painful as they were, had only reinforced something he had known deep down. The world would never be kind to anyone who tried to change it. The more audacious the vision, the more relentless the pushback. And yet, that same resistance was what had fueled his drive for so long. He could no longer afford to lose sight of the bigger picture, and neither could the companies that depended on him. Elon had already begun to shift his focus. The immediate crises had been dealt with, but the real test was just beginning. The challenges facing Tesla, SpaceX, and SolarCity were far from over. But he wasn't just looking at the next quarter or the next year. No, now, he was looking far beyond that, at the next century. And that's what kept him up at night. How would humanity be remembered? SpaceX was the one that kept calling him. He could feel it pulling him like an unspoken promise. Despite all the challenges, all the setbacks, he had made a commitment to Mars. SpaceX had launched the most successful rocket in history with the Falcon Heavy. But now, the company was gearing up for the next stage, the mission that would solidify his place in history, human colonization of Mars. SpaceX's Mars mission had been in the planning stages for years. But now, more than ever, Elon knew that time was running out. The window for launching the next big mission was narrowing, and every day without action brought them one step further from making the vision a reality. He picked up the phone and dialed Gwynne Shotwell's number. "Gwynne," Elon said, after the briefest of pleasantries, "how are we looking on the Mars project? I want an update. Full transparency. What's our timeline?" Gwynne's voice came back over the line, smooth but direct. "We're close, Elon. We've made progress on the Starship's designs, and our Raptor engines are performing better than we expected. But we still need to work out some kinks in the system, especially in terms of efficiency for deep space travel." Elon's brow furrowed, but he wasn't discouraged. He had never been someone to back down when things got tough. "I don't need just good progress, Gwynne. I need a plan. When are we launching the first crew to Mars? If we don't set a date soon, the momentum we've built will evaporate, and we'll lose our advantage." "I understand," she replied. "We're pushing hard for a 2024 launch. But that will only happen if we stay on schedule with the testing. We're dealing with a massive machine here, and space doesn't give you room for error." Elon knew she was right. Space travel, especially one as ambitious as colonizing Mars, was full of unknowns. There were thousands of variables at play, but the one thing he could control was determination. And that's what he had. It's all about execution. "I don't care if it's harder than anything we've ever done," Elon said firmly. "We need to make this happen. We can't afford to fail. The future depends on it." The call ended, and Elon sat for a long time, mulling over what Gwynne had said. He had often thought about the long-term impact of SpaceX, but now it was clearer than ever. If they didn't succeed in making humanity a multiplanetary species, they would never truly secure humanity's future. The Earth was fragile. He had seen it in the way governments handled environmental crises, in the rapid depletion of resources, and in the threats posed by climate change. Mars wasn't just a luxury project anymore. It was the backup plan, the insurance policy for civilization. Meanwhile, back at Tesla, things were also moving forward at a fast pace. The new product lines had been launched successfully, and production was beginning to ramp up. Elon's decision to streamline operations and reassert his vision for the company was paying off. The Model 3 was making its mark, and the Cybertruck was finally becoming a reality. But the electric car market was evolving at an exponential rate, and the competition was fierce. Elon knew that Tesla couldn't rest on its laurels. As ambitious as the goal of mass-producing electric vehicles was, it wasn't enough. He wanted to change the entire energy landscape, not just cars but every aspect of sustainable energy. He had to push forward with Tesla Energy, focusing on solar power and energy storage. Batteries. Tesla wasn't just about cars anymore. It was about powering the future, and that meant thinking beyond transportation. He spent hours in meetings with J.B. Straubel, his trusted co-founder at Tesla, brainstorming how they could scale their energy solutions to global proportions. They already had a foothold with the Powerwall, but Elon wanted more. Powerwalls were just the beginning. The vision was for homes, cities, even countries, to run off renewable energy. How fast can we scale up production of the solar roof? Elon asked, his mind already racing ahead. JB thought for a moment. If we get the materials right and the pricing makes sense, we could potentially see full-scale installation by 2026. But the challenge will be bringing the cost down enough to make it accessible to average consumers. Elon leaned forward, a fire burning in his eyes. Let's make it happen. If we can't make solar energy affordable for everyone, then we're not doing our jobs. We need to be ahead of the curve. Despite the chaos and internal struggles, the vision Elon had carried for years was now becoming more tangible. He wasn't just building companies. He was building a new world. But with every step forward, the pressure increased. The media was relentless. Investors were skeptical. Even his closest allies had their doubts, though they rarely voiced them. Elon understood the stakes better than anyone. He wasn't just putting his companies on the line. He was putting the future of humanity on the line. He would stop at nothing. The next big challenge came unexpectedly. It wasn't from an external competitor or a financial collapse. It was something far more subtle, yet more dangerous: doubt. The world was divided. There were those who saw him as a hero, a visionary, someone who would change the course of history. But there were also those who saw him as a reckless billionaire, someone who was risking too much, too fast. The press had been vocal in their criticisms of both Tesla and SpaceX. Some argued that Musk was trying to accomplish the impossible, and that his failure would set back renewable energy and space exploration by decades. Elon never let those doubts enter his mind. Instead, he took them and used them as fuel for the fire. The world didn't know what he knew, and they would never understand the depths of his vision. The world didn't see the urgency of his quest, and that was fine, because Elon was determined to prove them all wrong. The future wasn't going to be built on what-ifs. It was going to be built on what can. And so, the road ahead was set. There was no turning back now. Elon Musk had already changed the course of the future, but the most significant battles lay ahead. The question was no longer about whether humanity could survive. The question was, how will we choose to evolve? And as Elon looked out over the sprawling horizon of his companies, the vastness of space in the distance, and the interconnectedness of the world, he knew that his mission wasn't just to change the future. It was to ensure humanity's survival. The war for the future had just begun. Elon sat at his desk, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the cold surface. He had made his decisions, moved past the betrayal, and started building a new foundation for his companies. Yet, one thing lingered: the people. The trust of his investors, employees, and the public had been shaken. After everything that had happened, could they still believe in him? Could they still believe in the vision? He knew the road to rebuilding Tesla, SpaceX, and Solar City wasn't just about numbers or technology. It was about people. His vision wasn't merely about building electric cars or rockets. It was about changing the course of human history. And for that, he needed people who shared that vision, who would fight alongside him in the trenches, as determined as he was. The first step in this rebuilding process was clear. He had to reconnect with his team. Despite the chaos, despite the betrayals, they had all followed him into the storm. Some had lost faith along the way, but others had stood by him, loyal, unwavering, and resolute. Gwen Shotwell had been the first to rally the troops after the crisis. She had always been a pillar of stability at SpaceX, and now more than ever, she was the rock Elon needed. He called her into his office one morning to discuss the next move. "Gwen," Elon began, his voice steady but laced with the tension that had been building within him for days. "How are we looking on the morale front? Are we starting to get people back on track?" Gwen leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly as she considered the question. It's mixed. A lot of people are still unsure. The betrayal left a mark, but we've been pushing forward. The work is speaking for itself, but it's going to take time for people to fully trust the leadership again. Elon took a deep breath, his mind racing with plans. I can't afford for people to be unsure. We're on the verge of changing everything. I need this company to believe, to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. Gwen nodded, understanding the weight of his words. I agree, and we'll get there. But trust isn't just something you fix overnight. We need to rebuild from the ground up. That means transparency, honesty, and giving the team a reason to believe in you again. Elon's eyes hardened with resolve. Then let's start with me. I'll take the heat. I'll put myself out there, and I'll let the people see exactly who I am, what I'm about, and what we're trying to achieve. No more hiding behind closed doors. It's time for them to see me. Gwen looked at him for a moment before nodding. That's a bold move, but I think it's the right one. In the coming weeks, Elon began his efforts to rebuild trust with a series of high-profile speeches and interviews. He appeared on news outlets, social media platforms, and podcasts, speaking openly about the challenges he faced and the lessons he had learned. He wasn't just talking about his companies. He was talking about his journey, the risks he had taken, the failures, and most importantly, the vision that still drove him forward. One evening, he sat down for an interview with Jon Stewart, the former host of The Daily Show. The conversation began lightheartedly, but soon it shifted to more personal topics. Elon, let's talk about your failures. You've had a few, haven't you? Jon asked, leaning in with a characteristic smile. Elon chuckled, the tension in his shoulders easing a bit. Oh, a few? I've had more failures than I can count. SpaceX almost went bankrupt 3 times. Tesla was on the brink of collapse more times than I'd like to admit. And don't get me started on Solar City. I thought that was going to be the hardest sell of my life. People didn't believe in it. Jon raised an eyebrow. But you kept going. Why? You could have walked away at any point. You could have cashed in, sold out, and been done with it. Elon's gaze softened as he looked away for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more introspective. Because I believe in something bigger than myself. I believe that if we don't change the way we live on this planet, we're done. I have to fight for that future, for my kids, for humanity. I can't walk away from that. Jon nodded, his expression serious now. So, you're in it for the long haul? Elon smiled slightly. Always. These public displays of vulnerability and honesty were critical in rebuilding Elon's public image. But it wasn't just the media that needed reassurance. It was also his people. At Tesla, Elon began holding smaller, more intimate meetings with employees. No longer was he the figurehead who only appeared at the top. Now, he was the leader walking the floor, talking with engineers, designers, assembly workers, every single person who made the company tick. He shared his vision, not in abstract terms, but in a way that made people see it as part of their own future. One evening, he walked through the Tesla factory, stopping to speak with a team of engineers working late into the night on the next iteration of the Model 3. He could feel the tension in the air. Some were hesitant to speak up, unsure of his motives. But then one of the younger engineers, a woman with short brown hair and glasses, raised her hand and said, Elon, I've been here for almost 2 years now, and I have to say, I'm not sure I get why this work matters. We're designing another car, but is that really going to change the world? Will it make a difference? Elon took a moment, his gaze meeting hers. There was no defensiveness, just a calm that came from his deep understanding of the road ahead. I get it. A lot of people think we're just making cars. But what we're really doing is showing the world that electric transportation is the future. We're not just changing how cars work. We're changing how the world works. We're building the technology that's going to power the future, and that's bigger than any one car or any one company. We're paving the way for a sustainable future, and that future starts with each of you. There was a long pause, and then, one by one, heads began to nod. The room seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Elon was back, and he was more committed than ever to the mission. At SpaceX, things were equally tense. The pressure to succeed, to deliver on the promises Elon had made, was mounting. Gwynn and the team at SpaceX had made incredible progress on the Starship prototype, but there was still so much to do. Elon knew that trust in SpaceX was fragile, not just with his team, but with the investors, the media, and the world at large. They needed proof that the company could make the Mars mission a reality. The next few months would be critical. One afternoon, Elon called for a special meeting at SpaceX headquarters. He gathered the team together in the conference room, as he often did. But this time there was an air of urgency in his voice. "We're getting close," he said, pacing the room. "We've got the technology. We've got the drive. But what we need now is something that proves to the world we're serious, something that shows we're not just building rockets. We're building a new future. And I'm putting everything we have into this." He paused, letting his words settle in. "I want the Starship to be ready for its first uncrewed flight to Mars in the next 2 years. I'm not asking, I'm telling you. This has to happen. If we fail, we won't get another chance. But if we succeed, everything changes." The room was silent for a moment, and then Gwynn spoke. "We'll do it, Elon. We'll make it happen." Rebuilding trust wasn't just about transparency or leading by example. It was about proving through action that Elon Musk was still the visionary he had always been, a man who was willing to risk everything for the future of humanity. And with each step forward, his empire grew stronger, more focused, and more unified. Elon had faced many battles before, but this one was different. It wasn't just a fight to survive. It was a fight to prove that he could still lead humanity to the stars, to a sustainable future, and to a world that worked for everyone. And this time, he wasn't alone. Elon Musk had always known that changing the world would require sacrifices. But as the stakes grew higher and the pressure mounted, he was beginning to understand the true cost of his vision. The Mars mission was taking shape, but the timeline was tightening. SpaceX's engineers were working around the clock to finalize Starship's design, testing engines, refining materials, and integrating the complex systems needed for deep space travel. Meanwhile, Tesla's growth continued, but so did its challenges. The competition in the electric vehicle market was accelerating, and every day felt like a race against time. Yet, it wasn't the technical hurdles that weighed on Elon the most. It was the human side of things. The toll his ambition was taking on his relationships, his health, and his personal life was becoming more and more apparent. It had been a long week, and Elon had just wrapped up a meeting with Tesla's board. The tension was palpable. There was still doubt in some corners, especially after the fallout from his brief battle with the SEC. Elon had hoped that his recent push to restore confidence and deliver results would be enough to bring everyone back on his side, but some investors were still on edge. They questioned whether he could continue to juggle so many projects at once: Tesla, SpaceX, SolarCity, Neuralink, and the Boring Company. As the meeting adjourned, Elon stood alone in the boardroom, his fingers pressed against his temples. He was exhausted. His mind raced with the implications of every decision, the pressure of every failure, and the looming uncertainty of the future. How long could he keep this up? How long could he continue to stretch himself this thin before it all came crashing down? He knew that the burden was his to carry. No one else could shoulder the weight of his vision. But as the world became more dependent on his success, he couldn't shake the feeling that his personal life was slipping through his fingers. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. Grimes. Elon sighed, already knowing that their relationship was in trouble. The pressures of his professional life had always cast a shadow over his personal relationships. He was married once before, and he knew the toll his ambition had taken on his first marriage. Now, with Grimes, it was no different. They had been through their own battles, balancing her career, their son, and the demands of Elon's work was becoming increasingly difficult. He answered the phone, trying to muster a smile even though she couldn't see it. "Hey," he said, his voice sounding tired even to his own ears. "Hey," Grimes responded, her tone soft but with an edge. "Elon, we need to talk. This thing with us, I'm not sure I can keep up with your schedule anymore. We've barely had time to even see each other, let alone talk about anything real. And I'm not sure what this is anymore." Elon felt the sting of her words, but he knew they were true. He had been absent. He had been so consumed with his grand vision that he had pushed aside everything else that mattered. "Grimes, he cut himself off, struggling to find the right words. I'm sorry. I know I've been distant. I know I've been focused on everything except you and our family. She was quiet for a moment. It's not just that, Elon. I love what you're doing, but I need more from you. I need you, not just the guy who's always in meetings and working 24/7. I need to know that you still care about us, about this relationship. The words stung more than he expected. He was no stranger to failure, but the idea of losing someone he loved because of his ambition, that was a different kind of failure. I care about you, Grimes, more than anything, but I can't stop now. There's too much at stake. If I stop now, everything I've worked for, everything we've worked for, could be lost. Grimes's voice softened, but there was still a sense of finality. I get that, Elon, but don't lose yourself in it. Don't lose us in it. I don't know how much longer I can wait for you to come back. The line went quiet for a moment before Grimes spoke again, her voice shaky. Maybe it's better if we take a step back. I don't know. Elon's heart sank. He knew what she was saying. They were on the brink of something monumental, but their relationship, already fragile, was cracking under the pressure. I'm sorry, he said quietly, his voice low with regret. I don't want to lose you. I'm just trying to save the world. As the days passed, Elon found himself in a daze, caught between his personal life and the overwhelming weight of his responsibilities. Could he save the world and still hold on to the things that mattered? Could he continue this relentless drive for progress without losing his connection to the people he loved? The Mars mission was closer than ever, but his life was beginning to feel like it was unraveling. Each time he took a step forward in his work, it seemed that he was losing something at home. It wasn't just Grimes. It was his children, his friendships, his own well-being. Elon had never been one to back down from a challenge, but this felt different. This was a fight on multiple fronts. The future of humanity, the survival of his companies, and the very relationships that had always grounded him. Could he truly have it all? Could he save the world and still be the father, the partner, the friend he wanted to be? The pressure intensified when the Starship prototype underwent its first full test flight. Everything was riding on this moment. If the test was successful, it would be a clear indicator that SpaceX was on track for its next big leap. If it failed, it could set them back months, maybe even years. But Elon's focus was unwavering. He stood in the control room, watching the screen as the countdown began. 10, 9, 8. The numbers echoed in the room. Elon's heart pounded as the seconds ticked down. Everything he had built was coming to a head. Failure was not an option. 3, 2, 1. The rocket surged into the sky, flames billowing out as the thrusters ignited. For a moment, everything seemed to move in slow motion. Then, the rocket reached the apex of its flight and began to descend, faster than anticipated. There were gasps in the room as the screens flickered, showing a loss of communication with the spacecraft. And then, the unthinkable happened. The Starship exploded. The room went silent. Elon felt his stomach drop. He had failed. Again. And this failure, in front of the world, felt like the weight of everything crashing down on him. But as the silence continued, a voice broke through the tension. We knew this was a test flight, Gwen Shotwell said, her voice steady. We're going to learn from this, Elon. We'll get it right. Elon nodded, forcing himself to focus. He couldn't afford to let this define him. The mission wasn't over. Failure was just another lesson. As he left the control room, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing more than just rockets. He was losing pieces of himself, too. But there was no turning back now. There was too much at stake. And with every failure, his resolve grew stronger. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon sat at the head of the table, staring at the results of the Starship test flight. The room around him buzzed with activity as engineers and analysts scrambled to assess the situation. On the big screen, the visual of the exploded prototype flickered repeatedly. The damage was clear. The mission had failed. But even as he watched the debris, Elon felt something deep within him shift. Disappointment, frustration, anger. Yet, mixed in with all of that was a sharp realization. This wasn't just about rockets or technology. It wasn't even about his companies. It was about the human cost. How much longer could he keep going like this? Juggling multiple companies, constantly pushing forward, and continually sacrificing everything for a dream. The door to the conference room creaked open. Gwyn Shotwell entered, her face serious but calm, her eyes locking with his. She'd been by his side through many ups and downs, but this felt like one of the toughest moments they'd faced together. "Elon," she said, taking a seat across from him. "We both knew the risks. We've been through this before. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We've got to get this right. Failure isn't an option if we want to make Mars a reality. I know this hurts, but we can't afford to sit in it." Elon looked up at her, his mind still reeling from the explosion. "I don't know how much more I can take, Gwyn. The world is watching. I'm watching. And every time something like this happens, it feels like I'm losing a little more of what I came here for." She tilted her head, studying him closely. "You're not losing anything, Elon. What you're feeling is the weight of the mission, the same weight that got us this far. If anything, you're getting closer to understanding just how high the stakes really are. But this is how progress works. It's messy, it's painful, and it never comes easy. If you're serious about making history, you have to get comfortable with failure." Elon took a deep breath, his mind flashing to the countless times he'd been told the same thing. He had heard it from investors, critics, even from Grimes. He had become so accustomed to battling for the future that sometimes he forgot the personal sacrifices, the people who stood beside him through everything, and the costs to his own well-being. But something about Gwyn's words hit differently. Maybe because she was right. There was no going back now. There was no second chance to change the course of humanity. He squared his shoulders, meeting her gaze. "All right, let's fix this. Let's make it right." The weeks that followed were grueling. The engineers and scientists at SpaceX worked tirelessly, diagnosing the failure and making improvements. But the stress wasn't just technological. It was personal. Elon's sleep had become even more erratic. He'd wake up at 3 a.m. with ideas that couldn't wait, pulling his team out of bed to work through the night on a new iteration of the engines or the launch systems. There was no room for hesitation, no time for rest. And yet, every day, the question gnawed at him. How much longer could he keep up this pace? He had pushed the limits of human endurance, and now, his physical and emotional health were beginning to show signs of strain. At night, his muscles ached from too many hours hunched over blueprints and code. His mind spun with endless calculations, and even as he tried to relax, his thoughts were filled with doubts. One evening, after a particularly intense day of testing, Elon found himself in the Tesla factory, walking the production line alone. The workers were gone for the night, but he still felt the hum of the machines and the steady beat of the assembly process. He had been to this factory 1,000 times, but tonight, something felt different. He walked slowly down the line, his hands in his pockets, the distant sounds of the machines reverberating in his chest. This factory had been his baby for years, his first major step toward making sustainable energy the foundation of the world's economy. But as the machines whirred and clanged, he began to question everything he had worked for. He'd seen Tesla's success, the soaring stock prices, the environmental impact, the accolades, but the cost was undeniable. SpaceX's Mars mission, Neuralink, the Boring Company, they were all pulling him in different directions. Each day felt like a tug-of-war between his ambitions and his personal life. He thought about Grimes, about the quiet nights they used to share when the world didn't feel like it was spinning out of control. He thought about his kids and how often they saw him only on video calls, his face pale from exhaustion. "Am I making the right choice?" he muttered aloud to the empty factory. The question lingered in the air as he stood still for several moments, the factory lights flickering above him. He had always known there would be sacrifices, but in this moment, the weight of it all felt unbearable. He had started this journey to build a better future, but was the cost worth it? That night, when he finally returned home, Elon sat in front of his laptop, staring at his calendar. The meetings, the deadlines, the tests, they were relentless. And yet, something inside of him rebelled. The drive that had once been so clear, so focused, now felt like a choking fog. Grimes had tried to call him again earlier, but he hadn't picked up. Instead, He had buried himself deeper into work, into the mission, as though it was the only thing that mattered. He paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard, unsure of where to start. The weight of his own choices pressed on him, as it always had. But now, it felt different, almost suffocating. The phone rang. He didn't need to check the caller ID. He knew it was her. With a sigh, he picked up. "Hey, Grimes," he said, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "Elon," she said softly, "we need to talk." For the first time in a long time, Elon felt the vulnerability in her voice. This wasn't the same as their usual conversations. There was something different in her tone, a kind of finality, an air of resignation. "I know," he said quietly. "I know. I've been so caught up in everything. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I'm not so sure anymore. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm losing it all." There was a long pause. "Elon," she finally said, "I'm not asking you to stop, but I need you to understand. I need you, and I can't keep waiting around for you to realize that." His heart sank. He had been waiting for this moment, but now that it had arrived, he realized just how much it terrified him. The cost of his work, of his ambition, had become clearer than ever. Was it worth it? That night, Elon stared out at the stars from his office window, his thoughts racing. The future was there, within reach. But the question remained, what kind of future was he building? For himself? For his family? For the world? He didn't have the answer yet, but one thing was certain. The road ahead wasn't just about rockets, cars, or solar panels. It was about the price of progress, the balance between sacrifice and reward. And Elon Musk, more than anyone, was beginning to understand just how steep that price really was. The days following his conversation with Grimes were a blur. Elon had always been able to compartmentalize the various aspects of his life, but now, the lines between business and personal had blurred irreparably. The demands of SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, and the Boring Company were relentless, and no matter how much he tried to push through it, he couldn't shake the feeling that something precious was slipping away. For the first time in years, Elon Musk found himself sitting alone in his office, away from the chaos of production lines and boardrooms. The familiar hum of technology and innovation was absent. The weight of everything he had built felt like a physical presence, sitting beside him, breathing down his neck. He stared at the glowing screen in front of him, the news reports flicking across his phone. SpaceX launches had become a global spectacle, Tesla's market value was soaring, Neuralink's brain-machine interface was pushing the limits of science. On the surface, everything looked like it was in its prime. But the deeper he looked, the more hollow it seemed. His mind wandered back to the conversation with Grimes. Her words echoed in his mind, and he couldn't ignore the truth in them. She was right. He had been so wrapped up in the future, in his vision of a multi-planetary species, that he had forgotten about the present. He had forgotten about the people who loved him, his children, his friends, and yes, even her. A familiar voice broke through his thoughts. "Hey, Elon," Gwen Shotwell said, poking her head into his office. "You okay?" He glanced up at her, offering a tired smile. "I don't know, Gwen. I'm starting to wonder if I'm losing it all." She walked in, pulling up a chair and sitting down across from him. "You're not losing anything. You're just burned out. You've been carrying the weight of the future for too long, and the pressure's starting to show. This isn't a sprint. It's a marathon." "I know that," he muttered, his eyes staring at the screen in front of him, "but the future feels so close. Mars, sustainable energy, the AI revolution, it's all right there. But the more I push, the more I lose." Gwen leaned forward, her voice gentle. "You've always been about moving forward, but sometimes, moving forward means taking a step back. Look, I know what you're trying to do. We all do. But no one, not you, not anyone, can carry the weight of the world alone." Elon paused, the words sinking in. No one, not even him. He had built so many companies, each with its own revolutionary goal, but the truth was that he had never done it alone. He had always had a team, had relied on people who believed in him, in his vision, and yet, he had always felt like the weight of the world was his to bear. "I've been so focused on the destination," he said quietly. on getting to Mars, making life multiplanetary, saving humanity. But I've neglected the people around me, the ones who actually helped me make it happen. Gwyn gave him a soft, understanding look. Exactly. You're not alone in this. You've got a team. You've got people who believe in you. But you need to believe in them, too. They're counting on you to be there, not just as the boss, but as the leader, the human behind the mission. The words hung in the air for a long moment. Then, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders, Elon exhaled slowly. You're right. I've been so obsessed with the future that I've stopped taking care of the present. The next day, Elon made an unexpected decision. He walked into the Tesla factory, not as the CEO, but as a member of the team. He spent the day talking to workers, learning about their challenges, and listening to their ideas. For the first time in a long time, he stepped away from the whiteboards and the PowerPoint presentations to connect with the people who were actually making his visions come to life. He was struck by something simple yet profound: the pride that the workers took in their jobs. They weren't just cogs in a machine. They were part of something bigger, something that mattered, something that could change the world. That night, as Elon returned home, he felt different, lighter, like he had touched something real and tangible again, something that wasn't just about rockets, cars, or artificial intelligence. It was about people, the very people who had believed in his vision from the beginning, and the ones who had made sacrifices of their own to help him reach this point. The next few days were a blur of meetings, calls, and strategies, but this time, Elon's approach was different. He no longer felt the crushing weight of carrying it all on his own. He started to delegate more, trust his team. He brought in Gwyn and other key leaders from each of his companies to meet and discuss how they could better balance their ambitious goals with the human side of their work. No more working 100-hour weeks without breaks. No more sacrificing everything for the future at the cost of the present. At the same time, Elon reached out to Grimes. He wanted to fix things, not just for the sake of the relationship, but for himself. He couldn't lose her, not after everything they had been through. He needed to find a way to balance his vision for humanity with his role as a partner, a father, and a friend. The phone rang in the middle of the afternoon. It was Grimes. Elon had been hesitant to call her back, knowing how much was at stake. But this time, he didn't hesitate. He answered the call with a deep breath. "Hey," he said, his voice soft but sincere. "Hey, Elon," she replied, her tone calm but warm. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. About us." Elon's heart skipped a beat. "And what did you decide?" Grimes paused for a moment. "I don't want to lose you, Elon. I don't. But I also need to know that you're still here, really here. That you're willing to find a balance, not just for you, but for us." Elon closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words. Balance. He had never been good at it. But now, more than ever, he realized how important it was. "I'm here, Grimes," he said, his voice steady. "I've been running so fast toward the future that I forgot about the present. I forgot about you. But I'm ready to change that. I'm ready to be the person you need." The line was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, she spoke. "I'm willing to try, Elon. We'll figure this out." The next few months were transformative. Elon began to embrace the idea of balance, not just in his work, but in his life. He made time for the people who mattered most, taking breaks when necessary, and finding moments of peace amidst the chaos. He still worked relentlessly, but now there was purpose behind his efforts, not just for the future of humanity, but for the people he loved. The Mars mission was still on track, and Tesla's growth continued. But now, Elon had a new perspective. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but he wasn't walking it alone anymore. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Not just as a visionary, but as a human being. The decision to embrace balance was not as easy as Elon had hoped. While he had mentally committed to it, implementing it in his day-to-day life felt like fighting an unseen enemy. The world didn't stop spinning just because he had decided to slow down. There were still projects that required his undivided attention, investors eager for updates, and deadlines that couldn't be ignored. Elon's schedule, once dictated by a furious drive to the next big thing, now felt like a tug-of-war between his old self, the obsessive, never-satisfied innovator, and the new version of him, one who sought inner peace, connection, and a life that balanced work with personal fulfillment. Every day, he wrestled with the urge to fall back into old patterns. Work harder, work longer, never stop. But as the days passed, Elon began to notice something. There was a subtle shift in the air. His energy was different, more focused, less frantic. And his relationships were beginning to feel more genuine. When he spent time with his kids, he was present. When he was with Grimes, he wasn't just mentally planning the next mission or analyzing Tesla's stock price. He was there, listening, talking, experiencing life with her. The turning point came one chilly afternoon in December. Elon was standing on the balcony of his home in Boca Chica, looking out at the SpaceX launch pad. The wind ruffled his hair, and the sky was painted in the hues of a setting sun. It was peaceful here. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about the next launch or the latest technological breakthrough. He felt still. He couldn't remember the last time he had truly felt this way. Just then, Gwynne Shotwell called. Elon glanced at the phone, hesitating for a brief moment. Was this the usual update? Another demand on his already strained time? But this time, he felt different. He answered the call, and Gwynne's voice was calm, measured, but there was a slight edge of concern in it. Elon, we've hit a wall, she said. SpaceX's Starship prototype is still having issues. We need to push forward, but right now, we're facing significant challenges with the integration of the new heat shield technology. It's crunch time, and we're running out of time to address it before the next big milestone. Elon stood still, the weight of the news starting to sink in. But this time, it didn't feel like an emergency. It didn't feel like something he had to fix instantly. For once, his mind didn't race. Instead, he let the words hang in the air for a moment before responding. All right, Gwynne, let's take a breath here. We'll gather the team, but let's give everyone some space. We need to rethink our approach. Maybe we've been pushing too hard. Let's look at the bigger picture. This isn't a sprint. We can't afford to burn out the team over one failed test. Gwynne's surprise was palpable. You're right. Okay, let's take the time we need. But we can't afford to fall behind. No one's falling behind, Gwynne. We're building the future. But it has to be sustainable, for all of us. As he hung up the phone, Elon stood on the balcony for a few moments, looking out at the sprawling launch pad. The Starship program had been his baby, and every failure felt like a personal blow. But something had changed. The pressure of making history wasn't just about proving his brilliance anymore. It was about the people who depended on him, the lives that were being shaped by this mission and by his choices. He was doing this for humanity, yes. But now, he understood it wasn't just about the grand vision. It was about the details, the people, the relationships, the lives that were impacted not only by his decisions but by the way he treated them, the team, his family, himself. That night, after a long day of reworking strategies with the SpaceX team, Elon sat down to dinner with Grimes and their son, XAEA-12. There was an unfamiliar ease to the evening, an atmosphere of togetherness that felt both new and deeply familiar. Grimes smiled at him as they ate, her eyes full of a quiet understanding. "How was your day?" she asked, not with the usual subtle hint of impatience or concern, but with genuine curiosity. "Busy," Elon said with a chuckle, "but in a good way. We're making progress, just at a slower pace than usual. And I'm okay with that." Grimes raised an eyebrow. "Is that a new Elon?" He smiled back, a real smile this time, not one that was just plastered on for the sake of appearances. "Maybe. I'm learning, one day at a time." The weeks that followed were a delicate dance between innovation and reflection. Elon continued to guide his companies through transformative change, but now, he did so with a renewed sense of purpose. He became more active in team meetings, but rather than rushing to give solutions, he learned to step back and allow his engineers and managers to take the reins, offering guidance when needed, but empowering his team to lead themselves. The Starship program took a new turn as well. Instead of pushing forward blindly, the team focused on precision, collaboration, and deep analysis. For the first time, they weren't simply trying to get to Mars as quickly as possible. They were focusing on how to get there safely and sustainably. It wasn't just about building a spaceship. It was about building a foundation for the future of human civilization. Tesla, too, entered a new era of growth. Elon had always pushed for rapid expansion, but now he took a step back to focus on quality control, employee well-being, and product reliability. Self-driving cars were still a priority, but the ethical considerations around their deployment were given a higher profile. He began to see the bigger picture, not just of the technology, but of the societal impact it would have. By the time 2024 arrived, Elon was a changed man. His companies were still at the forefront of technological innovation, but now, he approached his work with a deeper sense of balance and responsibility. He no longer felt the constant pressure to outdo himself. Instead, he focused on creating systems and teams that could continue to grow and evolve without him at the helm every second. But even as he embraced this new approach, there was still one final, burning question. What did success really look like? One evening, sitting in his office overlooking the launch pad, Elon mused aloud. What does it mean to be truly successful? The answer didn't come quickly, but it came slowly, in waves. Success wasn't about the next big breakthrough or becoming the richest person in the world. It wasn't about landing on Mars or revolutionizing energy production. Success, he realized, was about the journey, not just the end goal. It was about the people who shared that journey with him. It was about the connections he had built, the trust he had fostered, and the impact he had on the world around him, both professionally and personally. Elon's journey was far from over, and the road ahead was still filled with challenges. But for the first time in years, he felt ready for whatever came next. Not because of his unyielding drive, but because he had learned the most important lesson of all. Success wasn't a singular achievement. It was a lifetime of decisions, moments, and experiences that shaped the future. And for the first time, Elon Musk understood what it truly meant to be successful. The months that followed Elon's realization about success brought both challenges and opportunities. As much as he had found a semblance of peace within himself, the world around him, particularly the worlds of SpaceX, Tesla, and Neuralink, didn't slow down. There was too much to do, too many people depending on him, too much riding on the future of humanity. But Elon had changed. He no longer felt like he was running a race against time, against history. Instead, he approached each new venture with a sense of purpose, guided by his belief that sustainability and collaboration were the keys to true innovation. Yet, the weight of his vision still loomed large. The Starship program, despite its successes, was in a constant state of flux. The testing was rigorous, and each failure came with its own set of lessons. But the stakes were high. Mars was no longer just a dream. It was becoming a necessity. And with every setback, doubts began to creep in again. Elon had always been prepared for the physical risks associated with space exploration, but as the mission neared its critical milestones, he found himself grappling with an entirely different kind of fear. The fear of the unknown. The question haunted him. What if we fail? What if this isn't enough? It was an evening in early 2025, just a few months before SpaceX's most anticipated Starship launch. Elon was sitting alone in his office in Hawthorne, staring at a holographic blueprint of the spacecraft. The design was flawless, innovative, bold, and ambitious, but something gnawed at him. He knew that to truly take humanity to Mars, they would need to address the unknowns, the things no one had yet predicted, the things that couldn't be measured by any formula or chart. And those unknowns terrified him. As the hologram flickered in front of him, a soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Gwynne Shotwell entered, her face calm but her eyes betraying a hint of concern. "Elon," she began, "we've been getting a lot of questions from investors and stakeholders. They want to know that we're ready for the next step. The financial pressure is building, and we need to make sure we can guarantee the success of this launch." Elon didn't meet her gaze immediately. He continued to look at the hologram, his finger tracing the design. "I know, but we can't guarantee success. Not with the risks we're taking. Not with the unknowns ahead." Gwynne walked up beside him, her voice steady but kind. "I get it, Elon. But we've been through this before, haven't we? We've taken risks, failed, and come back stronger. We're not just building a rocket, we're building history." He nodded slowly but remained silent. It wasn't the unknowns that scared him. It was the weight of the future that he felt like he was carrying. The more he thought about it, the more he realized. Mars wasn't just an ambitious project, it had become a symbol. It represented humanity's future. And if he failed? If SpaceX failed? The consequences felt too great. It wasn't just his own legacy on the line anymore. It was the future of everyone on Earth, and everyone who would ever live on Mars. Elon, you've always said we have to be bold, right? Gwen's voice cut through his thoughts. Sometimes that means embracing the unknown, even when we're not sure what's waiting for us on the other side. You didn't get here by playing it safe. He finally turned to her, his eyes tired but resolute. I didn't get here by playing it safe, no. But the difference now is that I know what's at stake. It's not just about the companies or the missions. It's about people, the ones I care about, the ones who trust me. I've been running from that truth for so long. I don't know if I can keep going like this. Gwen studied him carefully, sensing the shift in his demeanor. Maybe it's time you stop thinking about the pressure. Maybe it's time to think about why we're doing this, what we're doing this for. It's not just about getting to Mars. It's about showing people that we can overcome anything. If we pull this off, we give humanity something they didn't have before. Hope. That's why we're in this game, Elon. Elon took a deep breath. Gwen's words, though simple, had a profound impact on him. He didn't need to carry the weight of the world on his own. What he needed was faith. Faith in his team. Faith in the vision. Faith in humanity. I think you're right, he said finally. We're doing this because the world needs hope. And that's not something we can give up on. In the days that followed, Elon threw himself back into work with a new perspective. He knew there were still significant challenges ahead, but he no longer saw the unknowns as an insurmountable obstacle. Instead, he saw them as an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to innovate in ways no one had thought possible before. He spent long hours with his team at SpaceX, carefully reviewing every test result, every design flaw, every piece of feedback from engineers and scientists. They began to approach the launch with a new mindset, collective faith in the process, in the work they had already done, and in the team that had made it possible. And then, when the day came, it wasn't the pressure that weighed heavily on him. It was the sense that they were standing on the precipice of something truly monumental, a moment that would define the future of humanity. The countdown to Starship's launch began in earnest, and the eyes of the world were upon them. NASA, Tesla, SpaceX, everyone who had been following Elon's journey held their breath, knowing that this could be the turning point. 5, 4, 3, the voice over the loudspeakers called out. Elon was standing in the observation deck, his eyes glued to the rocket. The enormity of the moment was beyond words. He closed his eyes for a brief moment. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about failure or perfection. He wasn't thinking about the millions of dollars or the high-stakes investors. He wasn't thinking about the legacy he was leaving behind. He was thinking about the people standing next to him, the people who had believed in him, even when he doubted himself. 2-1. The ground shook as the engines roared to life. It wasn't a perfect launch. There were technical hiccups, problems with some of the systems, and a brief moment of terrifying uncertainty. But then something extraordinary happened. The Starship stabilized, soared into the sky, and punched through the atmosphere like a fiery comet heading for the stars. For the first time in his life, Elon Musk understood the true meaning of faith. Not in the traditional sense, but in the faith that comes from believing in something greater than yourself. The belief that no matter how many times you fall, no matter how many unknowns you face, you keep moving forward. The Starship was a success. Not perfect, but successful. And as Elon watched it disappear into the vastness of space, he felt a deep sense of peace. This was the beginning, not just for Mars, but for humanity. The weeks following the launch were a blur of excitement, media coverage, and quiet reflection. SpaceX's Starship had made history, not because it was flawless, but because it demonstrated that humanity could overcome the impossible. The world had witnessed something extraordinary, and the ripple effect had begun. For Elon, the success of the Starship launch had been monumental, but it was only the beginning. As he sat at his desk in Boca Chica, reviewing progress reports, he realized that the true challenge wasn't just getting a ship to Mars. It was the sustainability of that journey. And not just Mars, his vision had always been far broader. Space exploration was about more than just exploring the unknown. It was about creating a future where humanity could thrive on other planets. The media hailed him as a visionary, a genius, a man on a mission to reshape the future. But Elon knew the journey was far from over. The next phase wasn't just about Starship or Mars. It was about integrating technology into everyday life in a way that allowed humanity to become interplanetary. And that meant making sure the world didn't miss out on the momentum they had created. He would need to shift focus, expand the conversation beyond the stars, and into the future of Earth itself. The challenge was immediate. Tesla was undergoing rapid growth. The company was well on its way to transitioning the automotive industry to electric, but Elon understood the world's problems couldn't be solved with cars alone. Climate change, environmental degradation, energy sustainability. These issues were just as important as the future of space exploration. In fact, the two were intertwined. SpaceX could get them to Mars, but Tesla could change how the Earth sustained itself until humanity was ready to leave. It was time to bring his global vision into focus, sustainable energy across the board. One late afternoon, he sat across from J.B. Straubel, Tesla's co-founder, at the company's headquarters in Palo Alto. Elon was silent for a moment, looking at the latest energy reports on his screen. There had been a series of minor setbacks with the Tesla solar roof and Powerwall developments, both of which were crucial to the vision of a sustainable Earth. The problems were solvable, but they required attention to detail, something Elon hadn't always been able to give these projects in the face of his obsession with Mars. "So, Elon," JB said, breaking the silence, "we've got some hurdles to overcome with the solar roof scaling. The efficiency isn't quite where we need it to be, and the Powerwall is still a bit pricey for the mass market. I know we've been focused on the electric vehicles, but the energy side needs more attention if we're going to make this planetary shift happen." Elon leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. For a moment, he thought about the past, about PayPal, SpaceX, and Tesla, each in their own way a reaction to his vision for the future. But the reality had caught up with him. He couldn't just focus on one piece of the puzzle. "I've been thinking about this a lot, JB," he said slowly. "We've got to be all in. Tesla and SpaceX are not two separate ventures. They need to be part of the same ecosystem. If we want to solve the energy problem on Earth and make interplanetary life a reality, we need to reinvent how we think about energy, not just in terms of electric vehicles, but as a full-scale solution." JB raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the direction Elon was going. "You mean integrating Tesla's energy systems into a global grid? Something that connects with SpaceX's ambitions on Mars?" Elon nodded. "Exactly. What if we could build a bridge between our two worlds, Earth and Mars, using sustainable technology, not just for the cities of the future, but for entire planets? Imagine solar grids that could power entire colonies, not just on Earth, but on Mars. Imagine the power to fuel everything, from energy consumption to life support systems on the red planet." JB was silent for a moment, thinking it through. "It's ambitious, but I see where you're going. We're going to need the right partnerships, the right infrastructure. And most importantly, we need time and resources. A lot of both." Elon's eyes gleamed. "We have time, and we have momentum. The world is watching us, JB. If we can show that this works on Earth, it will make the mission to Mars that much easier." The idea of a unified, sustainable energy ecosystem, one that spanned both planets, became Elon's obsession in the weeks that followed. Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink would be the three pillars of this interplanetary future. Each company played a role, but together, they could achieve something much greater than he had originally imagined. And as he pushed forward on that vision, Elon realized something else. He wasn't just building a future for Mars. He was building a future for everyone, on Earth and beyond. In April of 2025, SpaceX launched a new mission, Starship's second deep space flight. This time, the goal wasn't just to test the spacecraft's endurance in orbit, but to send it to the moon and beyond. NASA had joined forces with SpaceX to expand humanity's presence in the solar system, working together on Artemis, the first step toward a permanent human settlement on the moon. For Elon, it was another opportunity to prove that human ingenuity, paired with sustainable technology, could overcome any obstacle. But this mission held another significance. It was the perfect showcase for Tesla's energy technology. solar arrays that could provide power to lunar bases, and Powerwall units that could store energy for long-term use. The possibility of using renewable energy for the Moon and eventually Mars was becoming more than a dream. It was a reality. Back at SpaceX's headquarters, Elon stood on the observation deck, watching the Starship as it stood ready for launch. It had been a long road to get here. Countless hours of work, thousands of engineers, and the unwavering belief that humanity could reach for the stars. But as he gazed at the rocket, he felt the weight of something far more profound. It wasn't just about exploration anymore. It was about human survival. His thoughts turned back to Earth, where the climate was changing at an alarming rate, where the future of civilization was uncertain. The stakes had never been higher, and the urgency of the moment couldn't be ignored. He felt his heart beat faster as the countdown to launch began. This mission wasn't just a test of engineering, it was a test of human resilience. The future was not just something he had dreamed up, it was something he had to fight for. And for the first time, Elon understood that the fight for the future was not just about going to Mars or the Moon. It was about changing the way the world lived, making humanity something more than a species on the brink of collapse. It was about making humanity a force that could survive, not just on Earth, but beyond. As the Starship roared to life and began its ascent, Elon felt a deep sense of peace. The mission was just one step, but it was the beginning of something much, much larger. A future that would transcend everything he had worked for. A future where humanity wasn't limited by Earth or by fear. The success of SpaceX's second deep space mission marked a pivotal moment in Elon Musk's journey, a moment when the blurred lines between Earth and Mars began to solidify into something tangible. It was no longer just about conquering space or overcoming technological barriers. It was about bridging the gap between the world they lived on and the world they would one day inhabit. But while the world cheered, Elon felt an insatiable need to push forward. Success had a way of multiplying demands. Investors wanted more, politicians saw opportunities for their agendas, and critics lined up with their usual skepticism. Yet, among all the noise, one question persisted in Elon's mind. How can humanity truly live beyond Earth? Back in Hawthorne, late into the night, Elon sat in front of his desk, staring at a map of the solar system. He had always been driven by a singular idea, making humanity multiplanetary. But now that the path to Mars was becoming more concrete, Elon's focus shifted towards something even bigger, sustainability in every sense of the word. Not just for life on Mars, but for life on Earth and across the solar system. As he moved his pen across the map, Elon's mind began to race with possibilities. He had always known that the technology they were developing at SpaceX was the key to long-term survival. Rockets, ships, habitats, these were all pieces of the puzzle. But there was something more important, something that needed to be in place for any of this to work. Unity, a unified approach to innovation, a unified global effort that included governments, corporations, and the everyday citizen. What if space exploration wasn't a race? What if it was a collaboration? The following week, Elon convened a meeting at the SpaceX headquarters, inviting a select group of influential figures from a variety of fields. They came from NASA, from academic institutions, from climate advocacy groups, from energy companies, and even from the growing ranks of tech startups. For the first time, Tesla, SpaceX, and even Neuralink representatives sat at the same table, brainstorming ideas not just about space travel, but about a global mission to secure the future of humanity. The room buzzed with excitement, but also tension. The issues they were discussing were monumental. The conversation ranged from space-based solar power to the construction of self-sustaining colonies on Mars to the ethical considerations surrounding genetic modification for long-term space survival. We have all the technology we need, Elon began, his voice steady but filled with purpose. The only thing we lack is coordination. If we truly want to make humanity interplanetary, we need to focus on a global effort. The time for individual innovation is over. We need to collaborate. We need to think not just about Mars, but about our own survival here on Earth. Elon's words hung in the air, and there was a quiet murmur around the table. Collaboration was a foreign concept to many. The idea that SpaceX, Tesla, and other private companies would partner with governments and traditional industries was an idea that still made many uneasy. But as the hours ticked by, it became clear that there was a growing realization around the table. Elon's vision wasn't just ambitious, it was necessary. In the months that followed, Elon's push for global collaboration started to gain traction. With the backing of several influential figures in science, politics, and business, they began to map out a plan for the Mars mission, but more importantly, they began to lay the foundation for a sustainable Earth. Tesla ramped up its efforts to revolutionize the energy sector. Their goal wasn't just to build electric cars, but to build an energy grid that could power the world sustainably. Solar, wind, and hydroelectric power sources would be integrated with Tesla's Powerwall technology, enabling communities to become self-sufficient. As the world moved closer to a future powered entirely by renewable energy, the need for fossil fuels would dramatically decrease, reducing the world's dependence on non-renewable resources. Meanwhile, SpaceX worked tirelessly to develop Starship for its Mars mission. But the emphasis was no longer solely on transportation. It was about creating an ecosystem, sustainable habitats that could support human life on the Red Planet for decades to come. Elon began discussing plans with NASA and international space agencies for shared resources in space, whether it was for research, construction, or long-term habitation. The goal wasn't to create another space race, but to create a global partnership that could overcome the challenges of settling on another planet. And then there was Neuralink, which continued to push the boundaries of human potential. With their brain-machine interfaces, Elon envisioned a future where the human mind could extend beyond the limitations of Earth's atmosphere. It wasn't just about technology, it was about human evolution. By linking the human brain to artificial intelligence, humanity could be enhanced, able to adapt more quickly to life on other planets, solve problems more efficiently, and perhaps even achieve feats previously thought impossible. As summer of 2025 approached, a significant milestone arrived. Tesla's solar initiative in partnership with global leaders began to take shape. Asia, Europe, and parts of Africa were coming together to share technologies, resources, and ideas. The world was beginning to see the potential of global unity in the face of environmental disaster and economic instability. Countries, once at odds, were now working toward a common goal: a sustainable Earth and a sustainable future for all. At the same time, SpaceX launched its most ambitious test flight of Starship, the goal being to test the spacecraft's ability to transport goods and passengers to the moon. But the critical success of this mission wasn't just about the technology, it was about the collaborative spirit that had led to it. One evening, after the launch, Elon sat at his desk in his office, staring out the window at the endless possibilities that lay ahead. The stars above were no longer just a symbol of distant dreams. They were a reminder of what could be. The work wasn't over. It would never be over. But Elon knew that something was different now. Humanity wasn't a single nation or a single company. It was a collective force, one with a single mission: to create a future on Earth and beyond. As the news reports flooded in from around the globe, Elon couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, not just in his companies, but in humanity as a whole. They had learned something invaluable over the past few years. Success is not about competition, it's about collaboration. And when people work together, no matter their differences, there is no limit to what they can achieve. By the fall of 2025, Elon Musk's vision of a unified global effort was no longer a distant dream. It was beginning to take shape in ways the world had never seen before. The collaboration between Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and global leaders was pushing the boundaries of what humanity could achieve. But with that progress came new challenges, ones that required a level of global synchronization never before attempted. Elon stood on the stage at the World Economic Forum in Davos, addressing a room full of business leaders, scientists, and policymakers. The climate crisis was at a tipping point, and everyone knew it. But Elon was determined to offer a solution, not just for the world's environmental problems, but for a new era of human progress. We stand at the threshold of the most profound shift in human history, Elon began, his voice steady, yet carrying a sense of urgency. We have the technology to fix the problems that have plagued us for centuries. We can no longer afford to think of ourselves as separate nations, separate industries, separate challenges. The reality is simple. We are all in this together. The question isn't whether we can survive. It's whether we have the courage to evolve. The room was silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. As the audience looked at Elon, they saw not just a businessman but a visionary. A man whose understanding of technology, society, and human nature had elevated him to the point where he could articulate the future with clarity. Following his speech, the ripple effect began to spread. Governments across the globe started to realign their strategies for climate and energy solutions. New policies emerged that embraced sustainable practices, including carbon tax incentives, renewable energy subsidies, and long-term agreements to reduce fossil fuel dependency. At the same time, businesses, many of whom had once been skeptical of Musk's ideas, began to invest in renewable energy infrastructure and space exploration. They saw the writing on the wall. If they didn't adapt, they would be left behind. But for Elon, these victories weren't the end of the story. They were just the beginning. The world had made progress, yes, but there was much more to be done. The key to achieving his larger vision was the intersection of technology and humanity, a bridge that would connect Earth's future with the stars. A few weeks later, Elon sat in a conference room at SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, reviewing the latest test results from the Starship Mars mission. The spacecraft had successfully completed its second orbital flight and was scheduled for a full-scale mission to Mars in the coming year. But there was something in the data that caught Elon's attention. The propellant systems were performing better than expected, but the long-term viability of maintaining a human presence on Mars was still uncertain. Space travel to another planet wasn't just about getting there. It was about sustaining life once they arrived. And that meant developing life support systems, creating habitats that could handle the harsh conditions of Mars, and finding ways to provide sustainable resources for future generations of colonists. Elon turned to his chief engineer, Tom Mueller, who had worked with him from the early days of SpaceX. "We need to think beyond the ship, Tom," Elon said, tapping his pen on the desk. "Starship is a means to an end. The real challenge is what happens once we land. We need to start thinking about sustainability on Mars, water, food, energy." Tom nodded. "That's where we're headed, Elon. The team is already working on in-situ resource utilization, ISRU, technologies that can convert the Martian atmosphere into fuel and oxygen. We're making great strides with regenerative life support systems. But we're going to need international collaboration to really make this work. No one nation or company can do this alone." Elon leaned back, thinking deeply. "That's the key, Tom. This isn't just about SpaceX. This is about creating a human presence on Mars and beyond. We need every major country, every major corporation to work together, just like we did with Earth's energy crisis. If we can pull that off, there's no limit to what we can achieve." Back at Tesla, Elon faced a new set of challenges. The push for electric vehicles had exceeded expectations, but the real question was how to bring that same momentum to energy storage. The Tesla Powerwall was an incredible achievement, but the world needed more. More storage, more integration, more global reach. At a Tesla Energy Summit in San Francisco, Elon stood in front of an audience of industry experts, government leaders, and environmental activists. He unveiled the next phase of Tesla's energy vision, a worldwide energy grid built around renewable sources. The future of global energy doesn't come from one country, one continent, or one company, Elon said, his voice unwavering. It comes from everyone. Solar power, wind energy, and hydroelectric power can be the backbone of a new energy grid, one that is decentralized and sustainable. And we're going to help build it. The room erupted in applause, but Elon wasn't finished. The true promise of this global grid isn't just to fight climate change, he continued. It's to create economic equality. Renewable energy can empower the developing world in ways that were never before possible. Imagine a future where Africa, for example, isn't dependent on fossil fuels or outdated infrastructure. A future where the entire world is connected through clean energy. The applause grew louder, but it was clear that Elon wasn't just preaching to the choir. He was creating something new, a global reset, where the old systems of division and competition gave way to a shared future. But while the world was on the cusp of transformation, Elon knew that the future wasn't guaranteed. The technological advancements, the global cooperation, and the massive societal changes were all part of the larger equation. But there were still threats, risks, and unknowns ahead. Politics, corporate interests, and social resistance were forces that could derail everything. Elon's team at SpaceX continued to push forward with Mars missions. Tesla worked tirelessly to scale energy solutions. Neuralink continued its experiments on brain-computer interfaces, hoping to give humanity the cognitive edge needed to survive the challenges of space colonization. And yet, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about technology, it was about the human spirit. The world was at a crossroads, and he realized that the success of his vision depended not just on technological achievement, but on the collective will of humanity to move forward together. One evening, as Elon walked the grounds of SpaceX's Texas launch site, he paused to look up at the stars. There, in the vastness of the sky, was his answer. The challenges they faced, on Earth and in space, were daunting. But there was a simple truth. Humanity could either remain divided and face extinction, or it could unite and evolve into something greater. For the first time in a long while, Elon felt a sense of hope, not just for himself, but for everyone. The dream of a multi-planetary future was no longer a far-off fantasy. It was a future that was already unfolding, and it was being built together. As the year 2026 began, the world was on the verge of the greatest transformation humanity had ever known. Elon Musk's global efforts to push humanity into a new era of sustainability and interplanetary exploration had gained unprecedented momentum. The lines between technology, politics, and society were blurring at an alarming rate. But with that transformation came an unsettling realization. Power, the way it was held, distributed, and exercised, was undergoing a seismic shift. Elon sat in the conference room of Tesla's new headquarters in Austin, Texas, staring at a series of reports that had been delivered to him by his advisors. The sheer scale of change that was coming was dizzying. Tesla's renewable energy grid was expanding rapidly, with new agreements in place to provide clean energy to Asia, Africa, and parts of South America. SpaceX's Mars mission was on track for its first crewed flight in 2027, and Neuralink's breakthroughs were edging closer to realizing the dream of a human-AI interface. But there was something else, something more subtle, that Elon couldn't shake. In recent months, he had become more attuned to the growing influence of technology companies in shaping the future of society. As world governments scrambled to adapt to the technological revolution, tech companies like Tesla, SpaceX, and even Neuralink had begun to play a role in global policy. The control of energy, space exploration, and even human cognition was no longer in the hands of traditional political systems. Instead, corporations, led by figures like Elon himself, were emerging as the new power brokers. In one of his late-night conversations with Gwynne Shotwell, the president of SpaceX, Elon admitted his concerns. "We're on the verge of something extraordinary, but I'm starting to wonder if we're moving too fast. The world isn't ready for this level of power to be concentrated in the hands of a few corporations. It's not just about building rockets or solar panels anymore. It's about deciding who has access to the future." Gwynne leaned forward, her expression serious. "Elon, you're right. We're already seeing political backlash. In some parts of the world, there's growing fear about the concentration of power in tech companies. But look at what we're doing. SpaceX and Tesla are addressing problems that governments have been failing to solve for decades: climate change, space exploration, energy independence. The question now is, are we going to use this influence for the greater good, or will we let others control the narrative?" Elon nodded, deep in thought. He had always believed that technology was the key to solving humanity's greatest problems. But as more and more technocrats, figures who wielded immense technological power, began to influence global policy, Elon was confronted with the uncomfortable truth. Technological progress was a double-edged sword. While technology held the promise of a better future, it also had the potential to create a new form of control. That same evening, Elon attended a global summit in Singapore, where world leaders gathered to discuss the future of energy and space exploration. The summit was a critical moment for him, an opportunity to rally governments around his vision of a unified Earth and multiplanetary future. But it also marked the rise of technocratic governance. Elon was introduced as the keynote speaker. As he stepped up to the stage, the room fell silent, the weight of the moment sinking in. He had become more than just a tech entrepreneur. He was now viewed as a leader of the future. The room was filled with representatives from the United Nations, world governments, and the private sector, all of whom had come to hear his thoughts on how to manage the rapid pace of technological change. "I've spent my career trying to solve problems that seemed impossible," Elon began, his voice clear and unwavering. "Whether it's bringing electric vehicles to the mass market, building a sustainable energy grid, or making humanity a multiplanetary species, all of these things have been driven by the idea that technology can help us overcome the greatest challenges of our time." He paused, looking out at the audience. "But now, we face a new challenge. We need to ensure that this technological revolution serves everyone. And that means we need to think about the distribution of power, about who controls the future. We must ensure that technological progress doesn't become a tool for exploitation or control. It must be used to empower humanity." After his speech, Elon was approached by several heads of state who shared his concerns about the rise of corporate power. They recognized that the old systems of governance, based on national borders and traditional politics, were no longer equipped to handle the rapid technological changes taking place. "We need to have a seat at the table," one of the European leaders said. "We can't let private companies dictate the future of energy, space, or even human consciousness. We need to be involved in the conversation." Elon agreed, but he also knew that the road ahead was complicated. The emergence of corporate power in the tech space wasn't a passing phase. It was the beginning of a new age. The era of the technocrat was upon them, and the balance of power was shifting away from governments to a new class of leaders, individuals and companies that controlled the very technologies that would define the future. Back at SpaceX's headquarters, Elon had a candid conversation with Jared Burkle, his longtime friend and the head of his family office. "Jared," Elon said, "I've been thinking about the future of governance. The rise of these technocratic movements, where corporate leaders have as much influence as political leaders, it's inevitable. But it's dangerous. We're already seeing how quickly the narrative can shift when we control something as fundamental as energy or space. How do we ensure that this doesn't lead to tyranny?" Jared sighed. "It's the paradox of power. With great power comes the ability to make a real difference, but it also comes with great responsibility. I think we need to focus on creating a new form of governance, something that blends the best of technology with democratic principles. Maybe this is the time for a new kind of political model, one where citizens are empowered, but where technology guides the decisions." Elon rubbed his chin, lost in thought. "Perhaps, but it has to be something transparent, open source, where the public can see how decisions are made and have a say in the future we're building." As 2027 loomed on the horizon, the question of how to govern a world shaped by technology remained unanswered. Elon's influence continued to grow, but so did the concerns about technocratic control. Would humanity embrace this new era of collaboration between governments, corporations, and citizens? Or would the rise of corporate power lead to the emergence of a new global elite, one that used technology to keep the masses under control? The world was about to find out. As humanity's reach extended further into space, and technology increasingly touched every aspect of daily life, a more pressing question began to emerge. What are the ethical implications of such rapid progress? The stakes had never been higher, and the debate over the responsible use of power, both technological and political, was beginning to heat up. Elon Musk, a man whose ambitions had already reshaped the future of humanity, found himself at the heart of an intense moral dilemma. In the spring of 2027, Elon was in his office at SpaceX, scanning through the latest data from the Mars colonization program. The missions were advancing at a pace that was, by all accounts, breathtaking. But there were troubling reports. One of the biosphere prototypes, designed to simulate the conditions necessary for sustaining life on Mars, had failed under pressure. The failure was not fatal, but it was a stark reminder of the dangers that came with building a new world from scratch. Elon knew this wasn't just about overcoming the physical challenges of space. The larger issue was ensuring that humanity's expansion into the stars didn't repeat the mistakes of the past. Mistakes that led to environmental degradation, colonialism, and exploitation on Earth. As he sat at his desk, looking at the failed biosphere, the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. I want to meet with the team in charge of the Mars project, Elon said, his tone unusually somber. We need to rethink how we're approaching this. We can't just keep building technology and assume everything will work out. We have to be more deliberate in our choices. A few days later, Elon sat with the project leads at SpaceX's Mars Research Division. The team had made significant strides in terraforming technologies, closed-loop life support systems, and even bioengineering plants that could survive in Mars' harsh environment. But the latest failures had forced Elon to confront a fundamental issue. What was the role of humanity in shaping the future of other worlds? Elon, said Dr. Sylvia Green, the lead scientist for the Mars Biosphere Project, we've made incredible advancements. But I'll be honest, there's something about this mission that feels wrong. We're so focused on survival, we're forgetting about the ethics of what we're doing. We're essentially trying to colonize another planet. It's no different than the way colonizers treated indigenous peoples on Earth. Who are we to decide what life forms, if any, get to exist on Mars? Elon looked at her, his mind racing. I've thought about that. A lot. I mean, we can't just come in and take over. But at the same time, Mars is a lifeless planet. There's no indigenous life we're disrupting. But there is something we're disrupting, Sylvia countered. The very idea that we have the right to change an entire world, even one that's barren, is a dangerous mindset. What happens when we start viewing other planets as blank slates? What happens if we decide that we can play God? Elon was quiet for a long time, processing her words. He had always viewed human progress as something inherently good, something that would ultimately lead to the betterment of all. But now, the scale of that progress was becoming so immense that it was difficult to ignore the moral implications. I think we need to be very careful, he said finally. We have to ask ourselves, why are we doing this? Are we doing it because we genuinely want to build a better future? Or are we just continuing the same patterns of conquest that have plagued us on Earth? This mission can't be about power or control. It has to be about coexistence, even if that means accepting that Mars will remain uninhabited. As the Mars project continued to evolve, Elon's thoughts turned to his other ventures, particularly Neuralink, the company that sought to merge artificial intelligence with the human brain. The breakthroughs in neural interfaces had been astounding, and the potential applications seemed endless. Enhanced cognition, the ability to cure neurological diseases, the potential to upload human consciousness into a digital format. But these possibilities also raised significant ethical concerns. One evening, Elon sat down with Dr. Robert McAllister, the chief neuroscientist at Neuralink, in a private meeting at the company's headquarters in San Francisco. Robert, we're on the verge of something huge, Elon said, his voice filled with a sense of urgency. But I'm starting to wonder, are we really prepared for what this could mean for humanity? If we can upload consciousness, we could be looking at an entirely new definition of what it means to be human. Dr. McAllister looked at Elon with a mixture of excitement and concern. We've always said that the goal of Neuralink is to enhance the human experience, to help people overcome the limits of the biological brain. But you're right to be cautious. The line between enhancing human capabilities and fundamentally altering what it means to be human is dangerously thin. Elon's mind raced. The implications were immense. Brain-machine interfaces could change everything, from healthcare to politics, even to the very nature of consciousness itself. But who would control this power? Would it lead to a new class of cyborg elites, individuals who had access to cognitive enhancements that the rest of humanity didn't? Would it deepen the divide between the haves and the have-nots? I keep thinking about the power we're giving people with this technology, Elon said. What happens if we start making it available only to the richest people in the world? Or worse, what if governments or corporations use this technology to control minds? Robert nodded grimly. That's the real danger. We're building a tool that could be used for good or for evil. The question is, who gets to decide? As these debates raged within SpaceX and Neuralink, Elon's vision for the future of humanity became more and more uncertain. The technology he had spent his life creating, the technology that had the potential to save humanity from environmental collapse, to explore new worlds, and even to reshape human cognition, was also laden with ethical dilemmas. Could progress be truly moral if it wasn't guided by a set of shared values? Elon realized that in order for his vision to succeed, it wasn't enough to simply build the technology. He needed to build a new ethical framework, one that would guide the development and application of these powerful technologies in a way that was sustainable, inclusive, and just. In the summer of 2027, Elon organized a global summit in Paris on the ethics of emerging technologies. The summit brought together leaders from tech, science, philosophy, and government to discuss how to navigate the rapidly changing world of the technological future. Elon, said Dr. Rebecca Thompson, a renowned ethicist and one of the summit's keynote speakers, you've done incredible work in shaping the future of humanity. But we can't just be excited about what technology can do. We have to be vigilant about how it's used. The power we have now is unprecedented, and without a strong moral compass, we risk creating a world that is not better, but worse. Elon nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that a lot. If we don't have a moral framework to guide us, then we'll end up building a future that doesn't benefit everyone. I believe in the potential of technology to change the world for the better, but it's not enough to just push forward. We have to ensure that progress is aligned with the greater good. As the summit concluded, Elon left with a renewed sense of purpose. He understood now that the real challenge was not just creating the technology that would change the world. It was ensuring that the technology would serve humanity, not the other way around. The future, he realized, would only be as good as the ethics that guided it. As 2028 dawned, the world found itself standing at the precipice of a new era, an era where the lines between technology, society, and government had become so blurred that it was nearly impossible to separate the two. With the rapid growth of SpaceX, Tesla, and Neuralink, Elon Musk's influence had reached global proportions. But with that power came a new set of challenges. The question that hung over the world was no longer about what technology could do, but about how it would be governed. Elon had spent the past few months deeply reflecting on the state of the world. He had long believed that technology was the key to solving humanity's greatest problems, whether it was climate change, energy shortages, or the need for interplanetary survival. But as the influence of his companies grew, so did the concerns about the centralization of power. People were beginning to ask, should one person, or one company, have this much control over the future of humanity? In a meeting with his closest advisors at Tesla's new headquarters in Austin, Elon shared his growing concerns. We've built something incredible. We've done things that many thought were impossible. But now I'm asking myself, what is the long-term impact of all this power? We've always talked about making the world a better place, but as our influence grows, we need to think about how we ensure that this technology is used for the benefit of all. Gwynne Shotwell, the president of SpaceX, leaned forward. Elon, we're facing a moment where we have the potential to reshape the entire global system. The world is looking to us to lead the charge in addressing the most pressing issues of our time. But with that leadership comes responsibility. We have to make sure we're not just reacting to crises, but actively shaping a future where equity and sustainability are at the core of our efforts. Elon nodded thoughtfully. I think it's time we shift the conversation. It's no longer about just building rockets or electric cars. It's about creating a new model of governance, a model that empowers people and democratizes access to the technologies that will define our future. That night, Elon couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his hotel room in Paris, thinking about the summit he had attended a few months ago, where leaders from across the world had come together to discuss the ethics of emerging technologies. While those discussions had been crucial, he knew they were not enough. The world needed more than just a series of regulations. It needed a new vision, one that transcended borders, politics, and traditional forms of government. At the heart of Elon's vision was the idea of global unity, a new form of governance where technology would not just be used to empower corporations or the wealthy few, but to serve the collective needs of humanity. It would be a model where the global community could come together to address the challenges of the future, not through competition, but through collaboration. But how could such a vision be realized? The world was still deeply divided along political, economic, and cultural lines. Elon knew that global cooperation was a lofty goal, but he also believed it was possible. If technology could bring people together in ways never before imagined, perhaps it could also help heal the divisions that had torn humanity apart for centuries. The next day, Elon gathered a group of his top executives, scientists, and visionaries to discuss his plan. Among them was Lori Garver, former deputy administrator of NASA, who had become one of his closest allies in the push for space exploration. "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about last night," Elon said, standing at the head of the table. "We can't keep thinking about these problems in isolation. Climate change, energy, space exploration, they're all connected. What if we create a framework that unites these challenges? A global network where we can pool resources, share knowledge, and collectively tackle the problems of the future." Lori nodded. "It's ambitious, but it's exactly what the world needs. We have the technology to make this possible, but we also need the political will to make it happen." The idea of a global cooperative is one that resonates with many of the values we've been trying to promote, but it's going to require a fundamental shift in how we think about governance. You're talking about creating a global ecosystem, not just for business, but for humanity. Elon paused, letting the weight of her words settle in. Yes, we need to think of this as a networked world, where the old power structures, based on individual nations, are replaced by a more collaborative, inclusive, and transparent system. In the months that followed, Elon began outlining a bold new vision. A unified global system where technology companies, governments, and citizens would work together to create a sustainable, equitable future. The cornerstone of this new system would be the creation of a global technology network, GTN, a platform that would allow for the free exchange of ideas, the development of sustainable technologies, and the democratization of resources. The GTN would be based on the principles of open-source collaboration, data transparency, and shared responsibility. It would be governed by a council of diverse leaders, scientists, activists, business leaders, and representatives from various countries, who would work together to ensure that the technologies being developed were in line with the common good. The system would also emphasize the decentralization of power. Rather than having a single organization or nation control the flow of information and resources, the GTN would be a global network of connected communities, each with its own input into the decision-making process. The idea was simple: unite the best of humanity to tackle the greatest challenges. But Elon's vision faced immediate resistance. Many world leaders, especially those in positions of power, viewed the creation of such a system as a direct challenge to their authority. They feared that a global network would undermine their sovereignty and ability to make decisions for their own people. Similarly, some corporate giants expressed concern about losing control over their intellectual property and the competitive edge that came from owning the rights to cutting-edge technologies. Despite these challenges, Elon was undeterred. He understood that building a new global order was not going to be easy, but he believed it was the only way forward. In an interview with 60 Minutes, he addressed the growing concerns about his vision. "People are scared of change, but we have no choice but to change," Elon said. "We can't continue to operate in the same way, fighting over resources and wealth while the world burns. Technology is the key to our future, but we need to share it freely, openly, and responsibly. The old systems don't work anymore. We need something better." As 2028 came to a close, the global technology network was still in its early stages, but the seeds of change had been planted. Leaders from around the world began to take notice of Elon's ideas, and discussions about the future of governance started to gain traction. The world was beginning to see that the future of humanity did not have to be defined by division, conflict, or inequality. Unity, through technology, collaboration, and shared responsibility, was the key to building a better world. As the year 2029 unfolded, the future of humanity stood at a crossroads. The Global Technology Network, GTN, once a bold idea conceived in a moment of quiet reflection, was now more than just a vision. It was beginning to take shape. The world had watched as Elon Musk and his companies led humanity toward incredible achievements in space, energy, and artificial intelligence. But now, the stakes were even higher. The GTN represented something far more profound than just the next step in technological evolution. It was the beginning of a new era. Elon stood before a massive screen in the boardroom at Tesla's Austin headquarters. His face was tired, eyes narrowed with focus as he addressed a diverse group of global leaders, tech moguls, and activists. The room buzzed with anticipation, but also skepticism. They had gathered for a pivotal summit, the first official conference to discuss the implementation of the global technology network. "Elon, you're asking us to dismantle centuries of tradition," said Angela Merkel, the former German chancellor, who had become one of the GTN's most vocal supporters. "We're talking about redefining the very fabric of international governance. The people are scared. We're giving away control. What's the guarantee that this network won't be hijacked by the wrong people?" Elon paused, absorbing the weight of her words. He knew the road ahead would be rocky, but he had never believed in easy paths. His journey had always been about pushing boundaries, about challenging the status quo for the sake of something greater. "The GTN is not about giving up control," Elon said, his voice steady. "It's about sharing power. It's about creating a system where the technology we build, whether it's for energy, healthcare, or space exploration, is available to everyone, everywhere. There is no more room for competition at the expense of others. We can't keep thinking of progress as something for only the privileged few. This network is about leveling the playing field. It's about democratizing the future." The room was silent. Some people were nodding, while others looked uneasy. Diverse viewpoints filled the space. China's representative, Li Wei, spoke up. "Elon, we understand the idealism behind the GTN," he said, "but the reality is that countries are not just going to relinquish their sovereignty. They will not give up the power to control their own resources. This idea could fracture the world more than unite it." Elon met his gaze with calm determination. "What we have today is a world built on the fear of scarcity, fear of losing control, fear of being left behind. But what if I told you that we have enough for everyone? What if we could use technology to create a world where resources are abundant, not scarce? That's the vision we need to adopt. This is not about relinquishing control. It's about sharing control." The room went still. For the first time, Elon's words had shifted the atmosphere. There was a sense that a shift had begun, however small it might seem. But the questions were far from over. Over the next several months, the GTN gained momentum. Through partnerships with non-governmental organizations, NGOs, international bodies, and private companies, the network began to form a foundation based on open-source collaboration. In the meantime, SpaceX achieved an unprecedented milestone with the first permanent Mars colony. A small group of pioneers who lived and worked on Mars, successfully growing crops and creating a sustainable ecosystem. But it wasn't just about space. The GTN's reach expanded to Earth's most pressing problems, such as clean energy, healthcare, and climate change. For Tesla, it meant developing energy solutions that were scalable across the globe. In the Sahel, a region in Africa where droughts had become more severe due to climate change, Tesla's solar and battery technology helped transform the area into a thriving agricultural hub. With the GTN's decentralized model, governments, businesses, and local communities had collaborated to make this a reality. In India, where millions had long been excluded from affordable healthcare, Neuralink partnered with local organizations to provide advanced neurotechnology that could treat neurological disorders. The benefits were transformative. Patients who had once been left without hope now had access to life-saving treatments. These projects were not isolated. They were part of a larger, global effort to share the benefits of innovation with every corner of the world. But just as hope began to surge, so did resistance. Corporations that had once been Elon's allies began to question the GTN's core tenets. The idea of open-source technology and resource sharing struck at the heart of the capitalist model. Jeff Bezos, who had long been an ally of Elon in the space race, publicly questioned the GTN. "Elon, what you're proposing may sound noble," Bezos said in a widely covered interview. "But it doesn't take into account the reality of human nature. People are self-interested. They'll take advantage of the system. How do you ensure that innovation doesn't stagnate when everyone has access to the same resources?" Elon responded in a manner he'd become accustomed to, with calm confidence. "Jeff, innovation will not stagnate. It's the opposite. When you take away the barriers to entry, you create more opportunities for creativity. The more inclusive the system, the more likely it is that the next big breakthrough will come from someone we don't even know yet, a kid in a rural village, an engineer in a far-off corner of the world. Innovation thrives when it's not hoarded." The back and forth continued for months. Many in the business community still clung to the idea that profit-driven models were the only way forward. But Elon's unwavering belief in the future of a collective society persisted, and slowly, the GTN gained allies. In the final months of 2029, Elon addressed the world in a live broadcast, a speech that would become legendary in the history of human progress. The world was on the verge of the final revolution, the birth of a new dawn for humanity. Fellow humans, Elon began, his voice resonating through the screen. The time has come for us to stop thinking of the future as something that only a few will experience. The future is for all of us. We've been given the chance to change the world forever, to redefine what it means to be human, and we will not fail. Together, we will create a world where equality is not a dream, but a reality. Where innovation is not a privilege, but a right. Where sustainability is not an option, but an obligation. The camera zoomed out to show him standing at the SpaceX launch pad, the Starship rocket poised for another mission to Mars. Behind him, the first humans on Mars were preparing to broadcast their own message back to Earth. This is our time, Elon continued. The future of humanity is not just in the stars, it's here, on Earth, and in our hearts. We are more than just the sum of our parts. We are a global community, and together, we will reach the impossible. As the GTN continued to grow, so did the sense of unity among the people of Earth. Whether it was in the form of groundbreaking medical treatments, clean energy solutions, or the push for interplanetary survival, the world had come together in ways never before imagined. The technologies that had once seemed like distant dreams were now shaping the reality of a new, more equitable world. And as Elon Musk looked to the stars, he knew that the true revolution had already begun. Not just in space, but here, on Earth. Humanity had found its way, not by conquering the unknown, but by embracing its collective potential. The final revolution wasn't just about new technologies. It was about the evolution of the human spirit. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?